Do you know the, are you signing in on P-CCS Cape Guest?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Pardon me? No problem.
Are you I don't know. I think there's a Zoom link now.
Does the microphone have to be like really close, or is it?
No.
Is the microphone
I don't think we have a Zoom link.
like closer than this?
We just pull up our
Okay.
link that Diane sent us.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay. That's a good question. Oh, but they're presenting it here. Okay.
Did you find it?
21. So we're about 21.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I think, actually, I have to get the script, hold on. You didn't have a printout of it? If she's got a printout, that would be great. I'm just worried without the plug whether my,
Hey, Nick, how many people are here for celebrating? So we might staff that. Okay. All right. All right, are we ready? Let's check with Mr. Brandon. Are we good, Mr. Brandon? All right. Good evening. I am Patty McCoy. I am president of the school board. I would like to welcome you here to our regular meeting. It is March 9th, 2021. I have 7:03. Previously to this, we had a closed session for the purposes of attorney-client privilege, and we are now reconvening for our regular board meeting. I would like my board members to introduce themselves. We will start down here to my left with Mr. Brooks.
Hi, my name's Doug Brooks. Thanks for coming out tonight.
hi, my name is Patrick Kehoe. Thank you for coming out tonight. I'm really excited to actually be here in person, and I appreciate the governor's new orders that allow us to actually meet in person right now.
Good evening, this is Anupam Chuksadhu. Glad to be here in person as well.
Hi, good evening. I'm Lauren Christensen. I also share my excitement for being in person for today, so thank you for joining us.
Board Member Sean Wilson.
All right, next up we have the Pledge of Allegiance, and since we are in person, we can all say the pledge as we stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United All right, we are going to move on to item A, which is adoption of agenda and approval of consent agenda. However, I do need a motion to amend the agenda to add action item 210353 under letter F, action items and discussion, and it is to consider a resolution regarding Freedom of Information Act appeal.
Madam President, I move that we amend our consent agenda to include action item 210353, resolution regarding Freedom of Information Act appeal. This will occur under action item F, action items and discussions.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second?
All right, it was moved by Member Kehoe and seconded by Member Sidhu that we amend our agenda to include action item 210353, which is a resolution regarding a Freedom of Information Act appeal under letter F on our agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes 6-0. Now I would like to have a motion to approve adoption of agenda, approval of consent agenda, action item 210351.
Madam President, I move that we adopt the agenda and approval of the revised consent agenda, action item 210351.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Member Kehoe and seconded by Mr. Wilson that we adopt the agenda and approval of the consent agenda. Action item 210351. Ms. Merritt, would you like to take us through it, please?
Yes, thank you, President McCoyne. This evening, we have for your consideration as a part of the consent agenda, new hires. We have a resolution for an administrative replacement for the Director of School Safety and Security. We have first reading of bylaws and policies. Bylaw 0143.1, that's public expression of board members. Bylaw 0165.6, cancellation. Bylaw 0167.1, voting. Policy 1615, use of tobacco by administrators. This is new. Policy 3215-4215, use of tobacco by staff. Policy 5512, use of tobacco by students. Policy 7434, use of tobacco on school premises. We also have for your consideration the approval of minutes from our special meeting on February 18th, 2021, and our regular meeting minutes from February 23rd, 2021.
All right, thank you so very much. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the adoption of the agenda and approval of the consent agenda has been approved. Dr. Vartanian Gibbs.
Good evening. This evening, I would like to introduce you to a new hire in our district. Her name is Ellen Iverson. She was going to join us this evening, and she is not here at this time, but she is going to be an English language development teacher at Gallimore School. She will provide service to the children at Gallimore School as well as the preschool classrooms at that location. She comes to us with a bachelor's from Eastern Michigan University and a master's from Western Governors University in Utah and over 2 years of experience. So we welcome Ellen to our school district, and we are very fortunate to have her here as a teacher. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Oh, are you done?
One more
Okay,
thing.
I'm sorry.
Okay, next I have the honor and privilege to introduce you to Mr. Joshua Meyer. Mr. Joshua Meyer, we are recommending him this evening as the Director of School Safety and Security for our school district. Josh has served as an interim in this position since October 20th, 2020. Let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Meyer. He has served over 23 years in in the area of public safety. He also served in a variety of positions before landing in Plymouth-Canton Community Schools. He was the Public Safety Service Officer for the Canton Township Police Department. He has served as a paramedic, a firefighter, and the fire chief for the Canton Township Fire Department. Josh was also a member of the Western Wayne County Urban Search and Rescue for 10 years, and for 4 years, Josh served as the Director of Public Safety for the Canton Township Department of Public Safety. Josh has received numerous awards and has been appointed to several state committees. We are very fortunate to now have Joshua Meyer as the Director of School Safety and Security in our school district. So congratulations, Josh. Do you want to come up and say a few words?
Good evening. I thought when I retired, my day of speeches were over, but here I am, and I'm happy to be here. So, as a lifelong member of this community and graduate of the Plymouth-Canton School District and Salem High School, it's an honor and privilege to be here tonight. I want to thank the board and Ms. Merritt for this opportunity. It's been a crazy 4 months navigating the challenges brought on by this pandemic, but I couldn't have done it without Ms. Merritt's support of the core team and the district's leadership. It's a tremendous team here in the district, and we certainly have a lot of challenges, but every day we wake up and we find new and creative solutions to those challenges, and I'm honored to be a part of that and a part of that going forward. With that, I look forward to serving this district, continue serving this district, and working to provide a safe learning environment for our students and staff alike. Again, I want to thank the board and Ms. Merritt for this opportunity tonight. Thank you.
Welcome.
And thank you for choosing us. And I would like to apologize. I skipped over Ms. Merritt and her team. But we're just going to move on at this point. But we're so glad you're all here.
That's right.
We're too excited because we're in person now. So now we are on letter B, which is one of our favorite parts of the evening, celebrating success. Especially fun tonight because it's in person. And Mr. Kehoe will be doing this.
Great, so I appreciate the opportunity here. So the celebrating success this evening is for the bus drivers of West Middle School. We have 12 bus drivers that are here, and they're just coming into the room right now, and I want to make sure that we can support them in this process. So while they get in here, then we'll be able to read this process. The 12 bus drivers that are named in this are Debbie Eskra, and please forgive me if I've mispronounced your name, Joe Beland, Judy Gagliard, Dan Packer, Michael Coomer, Frank Rushing, Steve Trozak, Skander Harkady, Jackie Turner, Jennifer Ellis, Marisa Wiersma, and Larry Smith. So celebrating success this evening will honor a special group of West Middle School bus drivers who continually go the extra mile for their students. This group of drivers presented a card to Lauren Kozicki, the assistant principal at West, with $750 worth of gift cards for needy families during the holidays. They collected the money and donated from between the 14 of them. The bus drivers are kind and gracious to our students. They often bring in coats, Chromebooks, and lunch boxes left on the bus. They know students by name, and they're often working Ms. Kozicki to help students make good choices and to go above and beyond to above all keep them safe. We are most impressed with how they handle the minor things on a daily basis with care and dedication. Nick, do you want to say a few words on behalf of these bus drivers? Or about these bus drivers?
I do. It's a real privilege tonight to read some comments from Ms. Kolzicki from West Middle School that she wrote about these amazing educators in our district. Thank you for inviting me to present this Extra Miler Award to the West bus drivers. I was extremely excited to find out that our bus drivers got picked for this award. We nominated them after they overwhelmed us year after year with their kindness, thoughtfulness, and generosity. Above being excellent bus drivers who take great pride in knowing their passengers and keeping them safe, they also care deeply for the West community as a whole. They attend band and choir concerts. They cheer at track meets and basketball games. They rush into the office with a list, computer, or favorite scarf. Many times they have reached out to me just to check in on certain students. Above all of this, they find it in their hearts to collect money from their own pockets every winter to care for our most vulnerable families. Each winter holiday season, they present me with a handmade giant card that has upwards of $1,000 in it that they entrusted me to divide up and give to West families. In a world that often focuses on the self, our bus drivers focus on the community. I am beyond proud to work with them and to honor them tonight with this award. That's from Lauren Klozicki from West Middle School.
Thank you. On behalf of the Board of Education, I present Debbie Eskra, Joe Beland, Judy Gagarled, Dan Packer, Michael Coomer, Frank Rushing, Steve Trozak, Skander Harkady, Jackie Turner, Jennifer Ellis, Marissa Wiersma, and Larry Smith with the Mary Beth Carroll Extra Miler Award. Drivers, would you like to say a few words about this honor?
I guess I didn't wait long enough because I wanted somebody else to speak. Just quickly, you may know that we pick our routes every year based on seniority. And we all go to a bid session with our certain route preferences and our desires, and we all have our own criteria. I will say for myself, and I think for many of the drivers behind me here, one of my criteria is I want to go to West Middle School. I know Mr. Smiley has been there since colonial times, and Ms. Kolzicki has been had 3 predecessors since I've been there for 10 years, but they have always supported the bus drivers. If we have an issue with a student, which quite frankly isn't often, they take care of it immediately. I have emailed Ms. Kolzicki and she has responded immediately. I see her in the bus loop about once a week, and she reminds me that she's a Spartan like I am, so we get along just fine. But they have always supported us in every way, shape, or form, and that will always be one of the reasons I want to go back to West. So thank you for myself and for everybody here and the 4 or 5 drivers that could not make it. So.
Thank you.
Congratulations for earning the esteemed recognition, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Bus drivers are certainly appreciated in the district, getting our students to and from school safely. We are now on to letter C, which is board committee reports and action. First up is the president's report. So I just want, first of all, I want to acknowledge that Leonardo Savage has tendered his resignation for the board. He has been having some continuing health problems, and while he is feeling better, he feels he does not have the time and the energy to devote to the board service, so he has resigned. We certainly wish him well. We thank him for his service and send our best wishes to Mr. Savage and his family. He will still be involved in the district. He has a school-age child still, so we do thank him. At the end of the meeting, we'll discuss the criteria for filling that vacancy. And I would also, in the past, since one of our last meetings, MASB had a weekend of some training, and I did several classes. Ms. Sadhu did several classes. We both did the strategic planning, since we're getting ready to do dynamic planning in the district. And Ms. Christensen and Mr. Wilson also took classes. So we got plenty of training done, and we're very excited with that. And I do thank the board members for their willingness to engage in the training. It makes us all better. So the next up is student performance and achievement, which is Anupam Sidhu.
Thank you. We actually met last week, Wednesday, And we had a great discussion, actually a really in-depth presentation and discussion covering the Student Mental Health Committee and the Social Emotional Learning Programs and the next steps that they are taking with the important work in supporting our students throughout the district. This presentation will be coming to the board in the near future, so you all will get to hear about the great work that's happening with this team. We also got an update from Superintendent Merritt about the secondary grading discussions that are taking place across the secondary levels. We heard about state and federal assessments with regard to the waiver that State Superintendent Dr. Rice has put out. And at this point, there has been no movement from the federal level for that approval, but we are still waiting to see what will happen after this month. We also had discussions about upcoming summer programs. We actually received some great news that the district will look to cover summer school costs for students. So that is an incredible opportunity for our students this summer. So I will let Superintendent Merritt actually share a little bit of that news and share the details.
When they're ready to be shared.
Oh, okay. So I was so excited about that because I think this is a great opportunity for our kids. But we also discussed what does summer school look like in the midst of a pandemic. So more planning is happening, and our other member, Wilson, was there, and so I don't know if I missed anything, but Member Wilson, do you want to add anything to the conversation?
So if I could request the sound to be taken up, I'm having difficulties hearing the conversation fully.
Okay. I was asking if you had any other feedback from last week, Wednesday's meeting, to add to the conversation.
No, it's fantastic. The presentations, as you mentioned, around social and emotional, really looking forward to that because I think the district is doing a lot of fantastic things and definitely a lot of opportunity for growth in that area as well. So nothing much more to add.
Okay, thank you. So one of the other things that we are going to be doing in the next few weeks is looking to fill a vacant seat that was left by a previous member due to a change in her work. So we will be looking at doing interviews in the next few weeks to fill a SPA committee member, and hopefully we'll have that new committee member announced at the next meeting. So our next SPA meeting is going to be April 7th at 4:30 p.m., and most likely that will be in person, so more information about where that's going to be. Thank you.
All right, next up is the Policy Committee. That is my committee. We have not met since the last board meeting. We will, however, be meeting Tuesday, March 23rd at 5:30. Since we will be meeting in person here, that meeting will be in person, and it will be in the Career Center, which is just down that way a little bit. There'll be signs up. It's easy to find. And anybody, of course, is welcome to join us because it is actually the best committee to be on and to attend. Next up is Finance and Operations with Mr. Kehoe.
Speaking about the second best committee that we can be part of, we met last Thursday, March 4th. We met virtually, and we discussed the playground and furniture that will be part of the new middle school additions and renovations that we'll be discussing this evening. This evening we'll be talking about the construction project, and at the last F&O meeting we talked about that playground equipment and that furniture, which will be going out to bid, and will be coming back before the board and through a future F&O meeting where we do that. We also reviewed the budget presentation that we'll go through this evening, that is the results of the survey from the community, where the community provided us great feedback into our budget process that is just getting started. Our next F&O meeting will be on Thursday, March 18th at 5 p.m. That will be in person at the board office on Harvey Street. Again, we welcome the community to come as long as we can maintain the social distancing and the capacity requirements. If there's a huge number of people that come, then we may have to move that to a different location, but that generally has not been the case because we are the second best committee.
All right, thank you so very much. Next up is Educational Excellence Foundation, David Ripple.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. I'm here on behalf of Gretchen Ward, the executive director, who's participating in a different school event this evening. and wanted to thank you for the opportunity to just give you a very brief update on things with the Educational Excellence Foundation. I am a relatively new member. I've joined the board a little over a year ago and recently elected as vice chair, so they just quickly threw me into a position to be helpful. I'm a community member. I'm a graduate of Salem High School just a few years ago, 1990, and I have two daughters. One graduated from Plymouth in 2018, and one will graduate this May and is off to the Netherlands for college this fall, so everyone say your prayers. But I'm grateful to have joined the EEF. I'm a lifelong fundraiser of all things. I've spent 27 years in this profession. I've spent a good part of a decade leading the fundraising efforts at Wayne State. Then I went to that school in Columbus that wears scarlet and gray. We don't speak the names of those schools in these places, but I led the fundraising efforts for Ohio State for a few years. I did some consulting. You know Mr. Wilson there from one of my clients, and now I'm in charge of fundraising for all of the St. Joe hospitals and health system. But with one of the attractions to the EEF for me and for obviously many of the community members that sit on the board is the opportunity to make a difference through philanthropy. Obviously, people pay taxes to go to public schools, and we pass bonds, we pass other types of ways to support, but we believe and we really see the opportunity to talk to the community members to see if they're interested in supporting the many efforts for our students, faculty, teachers, and the school district broadly. We are about to enter a strategic planning phase that will look at our opportunity to see how we grow the philanthropy for the EEF and for the district. And your partnership will be important in that. Mr. Kehoe has recently joined the foundation, and we're grateful to have the district representation there as well. And I think as the P-CCS dynamic plan is now coming to an end, I'm told, and I think there's perhaps an opportunity for us to be informed so the EEF can perhaps offer assistance through philanthropy in other ways in that plan. So it's been an interesting year trying to raise money during COVID. Our business is very interpersonal. We face-to-face, and doing things through Zoom and WebEx has been an interesting time, and not to have events. Obviously, the board has had, the foundation has had the wine auction and back-to-school bash and many things that have been kind of put on hold, but I think there's plenty of other opportunities for us to raise money in the near future. So I just wanted to give that brief update to you. Thank you for your time, and as a parent, and my wife would say this as well, thanks to all of you for navigating us through the last year. I know it's a thankless job in many ways, and we're all grateful for all you've done. So thank you.
Thank you so much. You certainly do great work at the Educational Excellence Foundation. So we are now on D, which is administrative reports, recommendations. First up is Ms. Merritt.
Thank you, President McCoy. I am so excited this evening to just share. It's like, I'm going to say August, September all over again, the beginning of school, the excitement in the air, and having our students back for greater opportunities for in-person learning. I continue to be so proud of our P-CCS village. It was a full all hands on deck for the last couple of weeks. Support staff within the E.J. McClendon building, our cabinet, core, throughout the district, our curriculum coordinators, everyone coming together to help out in our buildings with lunch supervision just to make sure that we could maintain our 6 feet of distancing during times when students are eating. We've had staff members step up and substitute teach in our classes so that our teachers could be released to go get their vaccinations last week. Just an incredible amount of joy and excitement in our young people in being back in school. If you recall, it's a lot changes, but we've had now our elementary students are back 5 days a week, our full days a week. Our middle school students are back 4 full days a week with full virtual learning on Wednesdays. Our Starkweather High School students are back 5 full days per week. And our PCEP students are back right now in their cohort model, half days, 2 days a week, and we'll be transitioning on March 15th to 4 days a week, half days. at PCCS. So it's been so much excitement. The kids are doing a phenomenal job following the mitigation strategy. Sometimes we need gentle reminders for mask wearing as they're talking and they may slip, but just being very compliant, building up our stamina to have a full day of school. Our teachers are absolutely amazing, just creating incredible experiences and really just continuing to be so creative, because school in a full day is not the typical school day. It's not our normal, it's our new normal, and just making that exciting for students. So just very encouraged by our first couple of weeks here back at school, and just looking forward to our next transition. I thought today just might be a good opportunity to kind of speak to some of the issues that have surfaced since we've been back in school. You've received emails, and I just thought this might be a good time to clarify. One big concern, I would say, is over our quarantine practices. And as excited as I am to be back, it is definitely a lot of work in terms of managing our COVID cases, and that is expected. I am happy to say, outside of athletics, we are not experiencing in-school transmission. So as soon as someone is identified as being COVID positive, our close contact quarantines are put in place. These are cases that actually the contact of the EpiLink has taken place outside of school, and we're able to move that student into quarantine. We have close contacts that are traced. We have case identification letters going out. Our mitigation strategies are working. Our schools are safe, and that is a good report. Has been a little bit more of a challenge in athletics. Right now, as of today, and you know, every Monday, the state reports outbreaks. So we have 2 of our high schools through athletics that will be reported as an outbreak, Plymouth and Salem. And remember, an outbreak is when you have an EpiLink that occurs here as a school-associated case. So in an athletic team where you have 2 or more positive cases that are connected, that's what's considered an outbreak. So that has happened with 2 of our teams here, one at Plymouth, one at Salem. Because of that, as you know, we do take our guidance for quarantine from the Wayne County Health Department. And the guidance is different for athletics than on buses and in the classroom. And I think that that is something that has been a little bit confusing for families. So we want to just make sure that we clarify. When you look at the most recent interim guidance for athletics from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, they really state that different restrictions should be in place and different mitigation measures should be in place when you're looking at athletics, because they have certain particular risks that are associated, especially with close contact sports. So following the guidance of our Wayne County Health Department, which our Michigan Department of Health and Human Services asked that we work with our local department, when we have a close contact quarantine with athletics, the entire team is quarantined. So if you were present within 48 hours of the positive test, if you were present at that practice or at that game, the entire team is quarantined. Now, it doesn't mean in our standard that is within a classroom or in a bus, that's less than 6 feet for greater than 15 minutes. Once again, that standard is different for athletics. The entire team is quarantined. And so we're continuing to try to educate our athletic families, because of course that is stressful for families, and sometimes not understanding why that quarantine requirement is different for athletics. This is not a P-CCS rule. This is us working in consultation with the health department. And as we've always said, we are the education experts and the health department is the medical experts. We want to keep our students in school for as many opportunities as possible in person, and so we want to make sure that we are adhering to that guidance. So we just wanted to make sure we clarify. I know that you've received some questions around that this week, and we'll continue to communicate the differences in that guidance, but that is based on the health department's guidance for us. Also, have some concerns I know that you have heard around our quarantine protocols. You as a board have been raising this concern from the beginning of the school year. How are we supporting our students while they are out on quarantine? And it is unfortunate, but we are in a pandemic. That quarantine is required if a student has within less than 6 minutes 15 minutes, less than 6 feet, you have 14 days as a close contact quarantine. So while students are out, they are working with, within the building principals. We have different guidelines that we're working with our teachers on. As we've talked here, we cannot make it mandatory for teachers to Zoom, allow students to Zoom into the classrooms. Many of our teachers are choosing that option, working at just a menu of options that our teachers can work with our families to just support to make sure that any classes that is missed, that students have that opportunity for those assignments. The beauty of our Wednesdays that are virtual, students on Wednesdays will have that opportunity to Zoom in live all day for instruction. And in PSEP, for example, in the afternoon, kids are in a half day. In the afternoon, it's live instruction. So our students also have that opportunity to work live daily with their teachers. We've also just posted 2 support positions, one for elementary, one for high school. So this is going to be almost like the concept of a homebound teacher, where there will be a live teacher who could give live support for students that are out in quarantine. So they have their assignments that have been given from their classroom teachers, and these teachers then would be available like a virtual kind of academy teacher so that they can have live support throughout the day. So we're continuing to work together to make sure that we strengthen opportunities for students to make sure that while they are out on quarantine, there remains a continuity of learning within their classroom setting. So that's something that we're continuing to support each and every day. Just wanted to make sure we highlighted that here. Another issue that came up this week was around travel. CDC has released guidelines, and once again, we follow the Wayne County Health Department that follows the CDC guidelines. And there is the requirement of a 7-day quarantine period followed by a negative PCR test before a student or staff member can return to school following international travel. So I think most recently with that guidance that came out, our building principals made sure that they shared that guidance in their newsletters to make sure that our families were aware. This is outlined in the latest Wayne County Health Department screening form, and that was updated on February 16th. So our families, every day you have to look at this screening form and you're self-monitoring for your students that are coming to school. This guidance is a part of that screening form. Once again, it's based on the CDC, Department of Health and Human Services order that was issued on January 12th, revised on January 25th, and effective on January 26th. Now, with that communication that went out, it did not reference domestic travel, and so I think that you may have received some emails this week concerning domestic travel. With the CDC, there's not a requirement for the 7-day quarantine or the negative PCR test with domestic travel as it is for international travel, but there's still some strong recommendations for self-monitoring during that period if somebody leaves the state. So we are going to work to update our communications with an advisory statement, but once again, we want to make it clear we're following CDC guidelines. It has a requirement if you're traveling internationally and just recommendations for domestic travel. So we'll make sure that we can share that piece of information as well. I think good news on the vaccine update. As we talked about before, just had a lot of receptivity in our staff for receiving vaccinations, and here we've been working through Wayne County Health Department. The second dose for staff vaccines are wrapping up this week. We have 125 appointments for our staff scheduled on Friday and 641 second doses scheduled on Saturday the 13th. So any staff member here in Plymouth-Canton that wish to receive a vaccination for COVID-19 will have their second dose in their arm by Saturday, March the 13th. So we're really excited about that. We're working with the health department to continue to offer opportunities for makeup, just in the event that somebody missed a vaccination or decided late that they would like that opportunity. So Wayne County is providing dates for our staff for anyone who would be interested in receiving that. And also our contracted employees as well are eligible. Our substitute teachers, anyone that is contracted with us. And so that's just great news. I'm going to end my report today with just an update on our return to school plans. I've been talking a long time, sorry. Again, our next planned milestone will be the phased-in approach to greater in-person for our P-CCS students. Right now, they are attending in a hybrid half-day model, 2 days per week in the blue and green cohort. We are going to collapse the cohorts, and effective March 15th, all students 9th through 12th grade at P-CCS will begin to attend 4 half-days per week in person. That half day, they'll come to school at 7:10, they're released at 10:30, they have travel time to get home, eat lunch, and then they sign in for live mandatory instruction with their teachers in the afternoon. So they have the same 3 classes from the morning and the afternoon, live instruction with their teachers each day. Wednesday will continue to be a full day of live mandatory instruction. They will have all hours 1 through 6 and that opportunity to meet directly with their teachers. This will take place through the month of March. So Wednesdays, full days of live remote instruction for both middle school and high schools will take place through the month of March. Our building design teams are still working and continuing to meet on implementation plans and looking for the next stage of our transition, which would bring our students back at PCEP to full days of instruction. The biggest hurdle that we are still dealing with, as we've talked at each of our meetings, is ensuring that when our students are eating and unmasked, that they can remain 6 feet apart. And so we as a district learning design team will have an opportunity to hear an update from the buildings. Tomorrow is our meeting, and see what progress we're making in terms of an update there. One good piece of information I just learned today, we had the outdoor tables that were ordered, and we thank the board for that investment for our safety for our students. They will be delivered on April the 23rd, so that's a little bit earlier than planned, and I think that the weather that creates just another opportunity to make sure that we can space our students out at PCEP. And so we will look forward to a report tomorrow at our next district learning design meeting from our building design team, and still talk through the logistics. Plan to come back with a report for the Board of Education at our next meeting in terms of that next phase. But I do want to make sure that our community knows just through the month of March that our students are remaining in PCEP. Once March 15th, the next phase kicks in, they will remain in that half-day, 4 days a week, hybrid model for all students, 9th through 12th, and we'll update them on the next transition. So with that, I'd like to entertain any questions that board members may have.
Sean?
Ms. Merrick, thank you for your report. Can you speak to specifically cases within P-CCS, the number of cases, close contacts, and then also the number of cases across Wayne County? So just give us a understanding of the trends that we're seeing countywide, and then specifically within P-CCS.
So looking at countywide, we did have an uptick this week in the number of cases. And I don't have that actual number from the county in front of me, but I think I quoted that in board notes. So definitely just watching, I think, as more schools are returning to in-person learning. We have individual cases there, but really the eye is more on what's happening in your community. And so, as I said, the good news that is being experienced across Wayne County is although there's been an uptick in cases within the community, we're still not dealing with the in-school transmission. So when we look at our elementary schools this week, we've had, looking at cases here, we've had elementary, we had 3 cases, but we had 34 students that then have to be put in close contact quarantine. We had 11 high school cases of positive and probable. This is just from last week, 5 middle school cases. But again, because we have the close contact quarantine protocol, we have quite a few students that then end up quarantined because they've been within close contact of those positive cases. Once again, with all of those cases, we do not have any in-school transmission. As I stated earlier, on 2 of our athletic teams, we do have that EpiLink that has been associated. So we have at Plymouth and Salem, those 2 schools will be listed as outbreaks today. They should actually be on that site based on 2 or more transmissions at that place. This week we had about 60 middle school students that ended up in close contact quarantine, and about 100 high school students once again through our athletic cases that ended up in close contact quarantine. So therefore, definitely the importance of continuing to work to strengthen our program while they are out on quarantine. That's no fault of theirs. Everybody following the guidelines, they are quarantined for 14 days. So just making sure that we are ensuring continuity of learning for their students when they're not here in school.
Great. Just a 1A or 1B question to that. Can you define in-school transmission? So, give us an understanding of what would constitute an in-school transmission.
So in-school transmission would be if one student, for example, became infected with COVID-19 outside of school. They came to school and then they infected another person. Here it's called a school-associated case. And that is what is defined as an epilink. So if the source of the contagion is between a student and a student or a student and a teacher here on school grounds, then that would be considered a transmission in school. What we're experiencing is a student may have been infected by a sibling outside of school, or a parent is positive outside of school. They come to school, the parent may get a test, and they call and say, hey, our student has been infected, or either a probable case, or the student actually comes down with symptoms. And then at that point, we have to close contact quarantine anybody that was around that student for less than 15 minutes, greater than 15 minutes, less than 6 feet. If, for example, so say, for example, there's one student who is positive, we have to quarantine 10 students. If out of those 10 students, one of those 10 students became positive, and the only source of the link was that original student, that would be considered a school transmission. So when I share, even with these cases that have been quarantined, those students are quarantined for 14 days, but they do not end up positive. So that is, we have to follow that protocol, but they're not doing in-school transmissions.
So we haven't had any students who were quarantined then come back positive, which would then have constituted an in-school transmission, correct?
So I want to clarify that, because
Okay.
we've actually had a case where a student who's been quarantined came back positive, but if the source of their contagion was not linked to, they could have had a person in their home that's also positive. And so it has to be, we work with each case with the health department. They do contact tracing, determining where the epilink occurred, and that is what makes a school transmission. Now, where I shared with the athletic cases, that is actually a situation where together on the team, one person is positive, we've quarantined the whole team, and then we've, throughout that quarantine, a couple of more students have been identified as COVID positive. So that means the epilink occurred 2 or more cases to that one epilink, and that is considered a school transmission.
Gotcha, okay. Second question, can you just give us some context on the expedited timeline? March 15th, we bumped up the return. Can you just, give us some context as why we expedited the timeline?
So we are originally looking at the potential of after spring break to bring back all students 9th grade through 12th grade back to the half-day, 4 days per week. The barrier to prevent that return is because we were not able to achieve 3 feet, a minimum of 3 feet in our instructional spaces. In January, if you recall, the state of Michigan issued new guidelines on operating schools safely. And although the standard for 6 feet is still the standard, when you're looking within instructional spaces, the state guidelines allowed for a minimum of 3 feet in those instructional spaces. Still shooting for that 6 feet is always a goal, but would allow in instructional spaces for us to operate with a minimum of 3 feet apart. When we looked at our P-CCS classrooms, we had some classrooms with 38 students in them, and we would not be able to bring the students outside of their cohort and achieve that, at least that minimum standard. And so the teams were working at the building level, did some work with moving students around to different sections. Many of our teachers have picked up additional sections to teach that would allow us to reduce density in the classrooms. They've relocated some of their larger classrooms to like a different area that would allow them to achieve that spacing requirement. So when we came back to our learning design team meeting, they were able to report that they had then achieved that one barrier that was preventing us from bringing students back altogether. And so once they were able to confirm, and then I think I came to the board meeting here to confirm to you all that we could at least achieve that minimum standard for continuity of learning, we made that decision to collapse the cohorts earlier so that all students would have an opportunity for at least to really minimize their opportunities for in-person learning. We're still at the half day, and that is because we're still working through the 6 feet. So 3 feet in the guidelines within a classroom space, but still 6 feet when the students are unmasked and eating. And so still working through that piece, made that decision to accelerate that timeline to March 15th so that now all students have an opportunity 4 days a week to be in person.
Great. So just one comment. I asked those two questions kind of side by side because I think they go hand in hand. So as we're tracking cases in Wayne County and then also in P-CCS, if we can also, look at it from a pacing standpoint. So if we're starting to see significant rises in Wayne County, a significant increase in the variant in Wayne County, and we're starting to see it in the schools, I would love to see it literally side by side on a graph so that we can determine if we need to pull back or continue to move forward or make other decisions. Because as we've always said, safety is number one, and we all believe in face-to-face, but I also think we have to create full transparency amongst the community so that if we do decide to pull back because there's a significant surge, they're aware of it. They've seen the trends over a number of board meetings so that when that decision happens, it doesn't come out of left field and they're going, whoa, what happened? So I really want to create more transparency around that because you are seeing an uptick. And I want to make sure everyone is tracking with that along with the board.
Yeah, that is a great point. We want to continue to help our community manage their own expectations because
Right.
safety is first. And so we don't accelerate based on a date, but when we're safely able to transition to that next phase. And so when we even look at March 15th, that will give us a full 2 weeks of data with our students back. So we have, and I can't overemphasize the fact that even in this cohort, we have 5,000 students that are attending our campus. So even bringing them back, we're able at this point, and I'm very proud. I know people don't feel as if this is fast enough at times, but we're doing something that even our colleges haven't been able to accomplish right now, but we have to do it safely. So a date for us is not the key, but what's happening with the data, what's happening in our schools. So this March 15th date, we'll actually have 2 solid weeks of all the students being back in a half day, 4 days a week, and then we'll break for spring break. So that we'll have an opportunity to look at that 2 solid weeks of data. Then we'll return, and then wherever, we'll have to talk about at what point we're ready to come back, but that also gives us that opportunity over spring break. So in talking with the Wayne County Health Department, we ask them daily, if you recall over Christmas and the vacation, they were worried or anticipating a surge, and now they're really starting to talk about, even though they haven't indicated that same concern of the surge that happened over break, still the idea that as people are traveling and going to different states and traveling internationally, just watching that potential for that uptick. And so making sure that we then have an opportunity to continue to monitor, and if we need to stay in this hybrid, based on that data, we will, absolutely. If we need to make any additional changes because of that, safety is first. I will also say I've heard just some feedback because of the supplemental bill that was just passed that requires 20 hours of in-person learning. And I know the governor was doing some vetoing of that bill, but some people I heard thought that we would automatically, you're required to have by March 22nd, 20 hours of in-person learning. That's what was the tie. And thought that maybe we would accelerate March 22nd because of finances, and that is absolutely not the case. We make every decision in terms of our next level or our next phase when we believe, based on the data, that it's safe to do so.
Thank you.
Doug, do you have any questions?
Yeah. My question is is about the music programs, and is there any problems with classrooms coming back together in the COVID environment?
I can't quite hear the question.
The music program, vocal and instrumental, I was just wondering if there's like any hurdles or any type of complications or problems bringing those students back into in-person learning?
No, with that, whatever program we have, we still have the same requirements for spacing. We have additional mitigation strategies and that we've purchased in terms of, is it, Debbie, I'm going to see. Special mask for instruments, so layering mitigation strategies to make sure that we're keeping all students and all programs safe.
So is there anything in their curriculum that lets them practice like outside because now the weather is getting warmer?
We encourage for all of our programs, and we're able to do so, to get outside. It's really, great right now with the weather turning as well. So any opportunity that teachers can get outside with their classes, they are encouraged to do so through, instruction as well as recess, opening windows. That is one of our mitigation strategies.
So even with other classes with teachers, you're asking that they find time to go outside to do their lessons and
yeah, there's no
school.
Restrictions on going outside.
Okay, that's it.
Lauren?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a follow-up question about your comment, mentioning supporting students who are quarantining. And we're obviously hearing some frustration with some parents and concerns about learning loss during this time for their students when they're quarantining for that 14-day period. And you mentioned that there are 2 positions posted currently for elementary school and the high school. And do we already have a person in place for middle school?
So it's an elementary and secondary. So
Okay.
that would be a K through 5 and a 6 through 12 coverage.
Okay, great. Thank you
And
for
we
that
also have
clarification.
had teachers that have volunteered to either, provide that live instruction during planning periods, or even of talking about possibly taking up an after-school opportunity to assist as well. So I, again, continue to be very proud of our village stepping up to say how can we best support students during this time period.
Thank you.
Patrick?
Sure. So first, thank you, Sean, for asking your questions, because you got a lot of mine out in that process. I want to remind the community that we are seeing an increased number of cases. We're seeing cases in the schools, not school-related, but we're seeing an increase in cases in the community. In the data that we're seeing more than 75% increase in the number of cases over the last 2 weeks. And that's something that we as a community have to take into consideration. We've got to wear our masks. We've got to be social distance. We have to be vigilant, or else we're going to get to a situation with, even just from the number of quarantine students, we might have to be able to stop having in-person education. So it's really incumbent upon the community to step up their protections and their mitigation so that we can continue to stay in person. So it's just my imploring everybody to continue to do this work, because we really, really want to be in person. My first question was on the quarantine and the support staff that we have. I think at the elementary level, one person's probably going to be great. We've got 34 students that are out on quarantine right now. But with 160 students out on quarantine at the middle school and high school level, I suspect we're probably going to need more than a single person to cover all of secondary. And I think that the challenge is that because of the movement of students at secondary level, we're likely to see we're going to see that trend continue, because we just see more students mixing at the high school level and the middle school level. Can we add additional resources beyond the teachers helping there? Can we post a second or a third position?
Yeah, so we definitely are, wanted to just get the postings out there so we can have that additional support, but just also recognizing that teachers are there and available, and that is also an option that some teachers are working to allow for that live Zoom and setting up. They really have a list of guidance on ways that they can support their students. And ideally, being able to work directly with their teacher would probably be even more beneficial than this one teacher, but wanting to make sure that we at least have somebody throughout the day, because teachers can't be in 2 places. And so if a student needed immediate support, and if this is something that is working, by all means, we can continue to increase that. So we didn't put a cap on it, but just wanted to make sure that we can provide that layer of support. Just looking for multiple opportunities to make sure kids can have live connections with a certified teacher.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And the second question is really, can you provide context for the board and for the community as to why we're keeping Wednesday virtual at both the middle school and the high school level? And I've heard some things, but don't know if that's a clear answer, and I think it'd be useful for everybody to understand that thinking process.
So I know that we've been talking about that in our district design team. The initial piece, while we're in this cohort model, we do have shared teachers between our middle schools and our high schools. And so looking at the scheduling issues, we needed to make sure that we had consistency with that schedule by keeping that Wednesday open. While we're also cohorting, that gave that opportunity for live. We're doing, as a mitigation strategy, a block schedule at our secondary level. And so students are only having that opportunity for first hour is meeting. So if you really think about it, even though they're coming to school 2 days a week, 2 half days, they're actually only seeing their teacher one day, because they'll have first, second, and third hour one day in a cohort, fourth, fifth, sixth hour, and then the next cohort comes on the following day. And so that provides an opportunity for more live instruction with their teachers. Now, as we look to transition into greater numbers of days, or with the future, that might be a day that is then eliminated. And so that's something that we will hear from our building design teams as we look to the next phase. But we just want to be sure that we communicate while we're in the month of March with the scheduling. We're trying to minimize any more changes to the schedules, and we could ensure that we have that live connection with the teachers while we're still in this cohort model on Wednesdays.
Okay, so just a couple things that I heard as I spoke to people in the district, teachers, health experts, et cetera, that having that Wednesday stay that way, especially with the block schedule, allows us to put more distance that could potentially reduce the number of quarantine students. So that if you have your school on first, second, and third on Monday, that first, second, and third doesn't meet again until Thursday. So that oftentimes is outside the 48-hour period of time that you have to consider for a close contact. So it has the potential to reduce the number of quarantine students affected by, or number of students that would need to be quarantined by a positive student.
That it potentially could, when we're looking at the park, for example, because they still are in blue-green cohort, but the middle school, now that they are together, that's less of an opportunity for that.
Got it, but aren't they
Because
still block scheduling at the middle
they're
school?
still on block scheduling, but all kids are there throughout the day, so.
Right, but they may not be in the same class.
Right, that's correct.
So if you had students that there was somebody that was infected in their first hour class, they wouldn't, if you were meeting on Wednesday, then they'd be within the 48 hours. They would potentially be considered a close contact in that process within 48 hours. If somebody was discovered to be positive on Tuesday, then everybody, if they were discovered to be positive on Wednesday, then everybody's affected by that. It just, there's a potential to reduce it. The other thing that I heard in speaking to some of the families and the teachers is that they really value the social and emotional aspect of that Wednesday process and the focus that we have on that. And so they're concerned that if we go to normal days on Wednesday, we would give up some of that focus time on social and emotional learning.
So we definitely have a priority to make sure that we are embedding opportunities even in full in-person. So we're already back 5 days a week in our elementary school, but making sure that we ensure as a part of our curriculum the social and emotional supports and lessons. So if we're virtual or in person, that is a priority for our district at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Anupam?
Thank you. Thanks for that detailed update, Superintendent Merritt. Member Wilson brought up transparency, and I think we all agree that we want more transparency in the reporting. I know the community has asked for it. It has been brought up at the board meetings about including the number of quarantine students and staff on our transparency dashboard. So I'm looking at our dashboard, and I'm wondering when we can start adding the number of students that are being quarantined. So I've looked at Northville's website. Their dashboard has all that detail, and Wayne Westland has that detail. I think it's helpful to the community to see what the impact this is having on students as they are being asked to not come into school. So when we look at hundreds of numbers, just within the first 2 weeks of school coming back, this is a big number. And then when you think about next week, when we bring more kids back, more density, again, I think having those numbers up front for everyone to take a look at, what is the impact of these positive cases? Because it's a trickle-down effect, so it's not the ones that we're just looking at a positive case here or there, but 1 or 2 positive cases could impact hundreds of students not getting their education. So that's one of my asks, is if we can get the quarantine numbers added to the dashboard.
So you want me to respond to that?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
So we talked about that in the district design team, and we actually are following the guidance of the state, and I know that individual districts have chosen to do it differently. But when you look, even though we're in a pandemic, public health crisis, and HIPAA laws are still in effect, and so when you look at the requirements from the state, they're asking that we report positive and probable positive cases, but we're not required to report close contact quarantine. So what could happen if you're at a smaller school and you have a positive case that's identified at, Bird School, and then you're able to identify who are close contact quarantines based on who was within that class, then you're looking at potential HIPAA violations, protecting the privacy, because then people can say and talk, oh, I know who the positive student is in that classroom. And so what we kind of talked about at the district design, that's why I've started to provide that information to you as a board so that you are aware of the close contact quarantines. And when I speak publicly, it's not an issue of not transparency, so I'm sharing as Trustee Wilson just asked me, so I give those numbers. Even in our communications, I give those numbers in the aggregate at times so that people can see the impact, but we're not choosing here to post them by school, just still trying to honor and protect the privacy of our students with HIPAA. And that's, I think, really what the intention of the emergency order that came down and why they're asking for those to be reported in that fashion.
And I understand that, and it's fair. So when I look at Northville's dashboard, one of the first things that they do up front is have the COVID cases positive / the number of people that are quarantined overall. So it could be a breakdown by level. So in elementary, we have X number, middle school's X number, high school's X number. So we don't have to worry about the HIPAA situation. But Northville actually goes into a very detailed report, and so I'm not sure what kind of HIPAA violation that is, but I think for us, if we want to be careful, I would appreciate even a number for each level so we can have that posted. Community members have asked for it, and I think it's only fair to be able to give them that information and not have to wait for a board meeting every 2 weeks to get that number.
So if we can talk more, maybe at the district design team, I know
Sure.
we're there tomorrow, and I don't want to ever speak publicly about why another district is making the choice that they make, but I want to make sure that we continue to follow and adhere to the guidelines that are established for us. And so we can just kind of talk through maybe what is a better way to make sure it is definitely not a situation of transparency, but just wanting to make sure that, we're still honoring protection. And like I said, it's a situation, especially when you're looking to, at the park, that might be a different scenario. But when you look at, one elementary school, and we all know everyone talks, and so as information is shared, that's somebody's personal information to share, they're free to share it, but we need to make sure that we continue to protect. That's something that's really important to us in our district, protect the privacy of our students.
Right. And so I just want to clarify, I'm not asking for building, but I think just an overall number would be helpful so we can protect that data. But yes, we can discuss that during tomorrow's meeting. My other question is also with regard to the quarantine, where we've had so many students be impacted. And I know it's not a great situation to be in. I am concerned, though, to see how many students will not be able to attend any live instruction except for those virtual Wednesdays. So when you think about secondary classes, that's a lot of content and topics that this other person may not be able to assist with. So you're talking about students missing out on those detailed instruction opportunities. And now we're asking students to kind of learn that material on their own, not knowing what is happening in class. So as a board that's committed to equity, I think about that this is an inequitable system or structure, not that we've caused it, but it's being put on them. So what can we do to better support these students that are in this unfortunate situation And I know, and I really do appreciate having these new individuals be hired and looked at. But I think longer term and a more systemic approach to this, is there anything else that we can talk about or that's been discussed with supporting these students?
As I shared earlier, just working with our buildings, our teachers, our curriculum department, providing guidance for our teachers for activities that they can do to really support our students when they're at home. So there's among the list of resources, we have them creating classroom resources and activities that are uploaded in Canvas for the students to be able to access, specifically any makeup assignments or specific lessons that they need to follow. They are connecting via Zoom, and this is a check-in with an individual student, so they're teachers instead of, these are additional supports that we want to provide with these external teachers, but being able to connect on Zoom with their own teachers, classroom teachers, is a part of that menu. Teachers creating recorded versions of classroom instructions for students to access asynchronously. So asynchronously meaning teachers will have that recorded and have students have the opportunity to access that on their own. Arranging alternative communications plans with the student and the family. This is something that we sometimes just need to be more flexible, and so working to say, even if a student is quarantined and the parent has to have the student outside, with some other kind of care, to be able to arrange a time that they can meet with the teacher to access different work. Arranging for the quarantine student to attend class remotely via Zoom. We've talked about that as something that we don't mandate, but we have a lot of teachers that are currently offering that as an opportunity for students to Zoom within their classroom. They're, I think, for the most part, probably doing that more as a live stream versus a interaction, because they do have the students in front of them, and they have to be responsible for managing that piece, but having students have that opportunity to Zoom into the classroom. Also looking at the curriculum coordinators, one of the instructional coaches, seeing if they can provide assistance there. And so our curriculum team, Department of Teaching and Learning, is really working together with our staff to continue to enhance these different avenues for multiple layers of support for students, and really just give that menu of options for our teachers so that they know how to work best with their students to support that learning.
Thank you. I really appreciate that response, and it's great to hear some of the creative ideas that are out there teachers are doing to support kids. Because again, this is a really unfortunate situation, and to miss 2 weeks or 10 days of instruction is a lot. So thank you, and kudos to the teachers that are helping fill those gaps. And again, as a board, whatever we can do to support with additional funding to hire more people, we're very supportive of that.
I appreciate that. I want to say again, I appreciate you acknowledging the hard work of the teachers, because I know early on, we talked about here at this table how much work that is to teach in two different areas, to Zoom while you have kids in front of you. And really, a lot of our teachers are taking on that work, and it's a lot. They're learning as they go, but having that willingness is one opportunity. And then at the same time, for those that are not, just equally providing additional, they care about their kids. And this is a situation that's not in control of anyone. It's not a P-CCS rule. It's just a health and safety in the middle of a crisis. But teachers are taking on that role to make sure that they are supporting their students and making sure that students aren't penalized for having to be in a quarantine situation.
Thank you.
All right, so the other board members got really all of my questions. I just wanted to follow up real quick on when you gave the numbers for the vaccines, just so the community is aware that there were staff who had access to vaccines on their own. So the numbers you're giving are not including that staff who got their own vaccines prior to the Schoolcraft.
Yes, I was only giving the number for the second doses that are scheduled for this Friday and Saturday. Remember that we had, Mr. Meyer, how many vaccines did we give out last week? Probably over 700? We've had probably in total, probably over 1,200. And so that's just those staff members, to your point, that have gone through our process with Wayne County Health Department, but we also have quite a few hundred staff members that were able to get vaccinated on their own. So once again, In our community, our school community, there's just been a lot of receptivity, although it's not mandated, but a lot of receptivity for our staff to receive vaccinations.
Ms. Merrick, can you just please repeat that number that he said? Because I don't think the people that are
He
watching.
said about 1,100 here through our Wayne County Health Department,
Thank you.
but we know of hundreds in addition to that have received the vaccination on their own.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It really is.
And I would like to thank you for your update, and also just echo what Member Sadoo said about the hardworking staff, who is really trying to make sure our students are completely educated through this horrible process. It's a lot of work for everybody, and we do feel for the students and the families also. This is completely out of their control. All right, so we are now on to the next one.
Madam
Oh,
Chair, I have one other question, if I may.
Hurry up.
So we completed the survey on March 6th for the safety.
right.
Can you give us an update on when that survey results will be presented?
Is Mr. Brandon here?
He's right there.
Did you hear the question, Mr. Brandon? So looking on the board survey that went out, it concluded on Saturday, and looking for when we would have feedback on that information.
We will have reports for that, initial reports by this weekend, and we can provide those for you in board notes if that's the best avenue. Does that work? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear who asked it. I'm sorry.
No, it was me. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
So you might want to, if we give you the information on board notes, and then if you want to include that for the agenda to talk through at the next board meeting, we can prepare for
Yep,
that.
I just wanted the community to know that we received the results, and they'll, make its way to the board, and then ultimately to the community. So, thank you.
All right, we are on to Finance and Operations with Ms. Piaz.
Good evening. Tomorrow is the one-year anniversary of the 2020 bond election. So I want to change the tenor of the room to something positive that's going on in our community. Our community was supportive of $275 million in bond work. And tonight is the culmination of that first year of work. We have hired our architects, TMP, and our construction manager, McCarthy and Smith. And here representing those firms tonight is Bill McCarthy and Brian Gussman from McCarthy Smith, and Derek Dinkaloo and David Larson from TMP. They're going to provide you a brief presentation of EL1, which is the first 4 elementary buildings: Dodson, Erickson, Field, and Hulsing. Thanks very much, gentlemen, and the floor is yours.
It's hard to hear that mic, I don't know.
Is that mic on?
Nope.
No.
Can't hear you.
We want to come on this side?
It'll come on?
Okay.
There we
go.
are.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's great to be here this evening. Like Debbie said, a year ago we were celebrating the passage of the bond. So, if you go to the first. So I should start. I'm Derek Dinkaloo with TMP Architecture. BidPAC EL1 started with the board approval on September 15th. And really, once that was done, we dove right in with multiple meetings with district administrators, principals, teachers, and staff from the 4 schools. We had regular meetings to refine the plans, and we created options to spur on discussions and generate decisions so that we could get to this point. All of that culminated in a set of documents that were sent out to contractors at the beginning of this year, and to solicit the bid pricing, and the bids were returned on February 4th. Before Brian goes into the bid results, I'm just going to give you a quick reminder of what these projects were. So at Dotson, the work was a 4-classroom addition on the south side of the play area. And as in all of 4 schools, there was also miscellaneous remodeling within the building, as well as new LED lights throughout. That was one of the big miscellaneous projects. So you can see how Dotson, that small addition, fits in with Dotson. So the remainder of the projects were at what we call the triplets, Erickson, Field, and Holsing, where there was an addition with a new secure entry, and that really created a new face for those buildings, a new public face. Those additions also included new main offices, gymnasiums, and 2 classrooms. Additionally, the parking and the drives were reoriented, one to help with the additions, but 2 also to have longer queuing for automobiles dropping off. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian to talk about the bid results for those projects.
Good evening. My name is Brian Gessman with McCarthy & Smith. As Derek mentioned, I'd like to echo our excitement to present this presentation and show it in front of you guys today. What you see in front of you is a lot of numbers and a lot of information. This is kind of the culmination of that bidding effort that Derek had described. All in all, we received just under 400 separate proposals throughout the 4 buildings. Nick, if you want to keep scrolling through. Basically, this document shows all of the low bidders in which we've sat down individually, virtually at this time, to ensure that they're qualified bidders and make sure that we're confident in recommending them here today. As we go through, all in all, it's about 73 individual contracts that we're proposing to get all of this work complete between the triplets, Erickson, Field, and Holsing, as well as Dodson. This is kind of a sneak peek of the full award recommendation that we'll be talking about, I think, on the next agenda item. And this is really the nuts and bolts of that award recommendation. So we put together the construction budget. What you see here in this blue budget summary is basically how this breaks down and where did we land as far as budget dollars. So we had an initial construction budget. Playground was removed from that budget, and you'll be seeing a presentation in the future on a proposal for that, which gave us then a revised construction budget. To then give us to a base bid total of $17,245,343, and then a whole bunch of alternates. I think it's important maybe to mention alternates. As Derek alluded, and met with building stakeholders, some things come up that maybe were not as part of the original plan, but through that conversation, some great ideas might be spurred that if the budget could support, maybe now is a great opportunity to maximize those dollars and to incorporate some of these items. Some of these alternates that I reference are carpeting at Dodson. This was carpeting that was not scheduled for replacement, but due to its age, really was necessary. And at this stage of the process, the budget would support that. So we've included the carpeting for Dodson, as well as painting of the ceiling grid. Throughout the triplets, as we call them, Erickson, Field, and Holsing, a lot of the existing ceiling grid is in good shape, but could be in better shape with a coat of paint. So with that, we've included those alternates as part of this. Additionally, Field Elementary is one of the final buildings of the triplets that have some old casework in need of replacement, and so we've included that as part of this award recommendation. And then finally, Erickson, Field, and Holsing also have a aging fire alarm system. So again, in the spirit of while we're there, while we can get competitive quotes and get our best bang for our buck, that is what we are including as part of this proposal today for the Board of Education to contemplate. Additionally, there are a couple voluntary alternates that through that post-bid process were necessary to be included as part of this proposal. inclusive of some painting, due to some scheduling conflicts, so to speak, as well as some mechanical rooftop screening that is necessary as part of the project. So all in all, again, sharing the good news, the great news is that we are under budget quite significantly. We're estimating about 13.58% under budget, which is a positive variance of over $2.5 million. So it's a great start. There will be in the future, this is the kickoff of the 2020 bond. It will be fast and furious, hopefully, with the upcoming projects that we're also excited to discuss. It is probably a good thing to mention. We're very excited about all the proposals that we did receive. We are hearing word that although with this pandemic, receiving material not only locking in pricing, but locking in procurement of that materials is a concern that we want to make sure we're cognizant of moving forward as we propose different timelines for different projects in the future. With that, I think that pretty much concludes my summary of our award recommendation. Any questions?
All right, Sean, do you have any questions?
Well, the biggest thing I heard was under budget, so that's a beautiful thing.
Should have led with
But in addition to that, do we track the number of minority bids that we receive from companies, minority-based companies?
We don't specifically identify it like on our award recommendation, but certainly there are avenues when bidders submit their proposals for them to identify it so we are aware of who's out there.
Okay, that would be something I would love to see. Yeah.
Doug?
Yeah, this variance that we have that's the underbid, right?
Say that one more time?
The variance, that's the money that didn't go towards it. Are we going to use that now or later, or use it to secure, like you're saying, some of the materials?
So we've used this term before as an unallocated. So basically, we've allocated a certain amount of dollars for this project. The great news is there is a surplus of dollars. There are certain things that we're working through with technology, for instance, to make sure that all the needs are met with that. But as of right now, there is not a specific plan for those dollars. They'll essentially be held, pushed off to the side as we budget. And much like the 2013 bond, if there's dollars kind of left over at the end, we would have to come back to the board and the district to determine what other projects potentially may want to be considered.
Okay, thanks.
Lauren?
I guess I want to maybe highlight some things on the alternates that you discussed for this evening. I know we discussed this at our F&O meeting, but I think it'd be important for the community to know too, just looking at, alternate 4A, B, and C, are 3 of the buildings are receiving that fire alarm update, but we have 1 that's not. Can you explain why that wasn't included?
Sure, so great question. So Iverson Field and Holsing happen to be the oldest fire alarm systems. Although functional and 100% safe, we wanted to get the competitive pricing to see if budgeting were to be promising, it would be a great opportunity to a system that inevitably in the future would need to be replaced. Iverson Field and Holsing really met that bill where Dodson has a newer system and its replacement is not as critical at this time.
Thank you.
Patrick?
Well, Brian, thank you for the presentation. We went over this multiple times in F&O in the second best committee where we've talked about all these fantastic projects. I want to reiterate for the community that this is fantastic work that we're doing to bring equity to our schools, especially at what's called the triplets, the 3 schools that are very similarly built, that have shared spaces for their gyms, for their cafeteria, and for their auditorium. And this allows us to separate those as well as to provide dedicated art and music spaces in both of those buildings, as well as upgrades throughout the buildings. So we're really excited about the work that this bond can do and how it moves this process forward. So I want to thank you and the administration and the whole team that helped to bring these things forward. I know this is a challenging time, both with COVID and the contracting environment. And just as a note for the community here, we're bringing this forward as a first and final bid. Normally we would do this as a first bid and then a second bid, but because of we pushed this particular item off the last board meeting because of some scheduling adjustments that we made. and we need to make sure that we get locked in with those contractors and with the materials that we need to purchase. This has gone through F&O twice, so there were 2 public opportunities to hear about this process and to see this information, and we feel that this is an important enough project for us to move forward because of the timelines. So thank you.
Anupam?
Thank you. By the way, just echoing, thank you for sharing that cost savings. That's incredible, and please keep that coming. And Lauren, thanks for asking about the missing building, because that was one of my questions. I do need a little clarity on the wording of what alternate means in terms of, so I'm looking at alternate 2A, 2B, 2C, and for the paint ceiling grid. What does that mean? What's the alternate wording mean in this scenario?
So we'll start with what an alternate is. So, right, alternate is not something that was base bid, that was initially discussed. So that was something that maybe came to fruition through consultation with principals or building staff that said, hey, this might be a great opportunity to get a price on. So that gives us, or the district, the Board of Education, the option to either accept or not to accept. But it's a great opportunity to get, pricing upfront. So that way you have, again, your best bang for your buck. So specifically when it comes to 2A, 2B, and 2C, the scope, the base bid we call it, is the ceiling tile itself. And this room's a bad example because we don't have any, but a lay-in ceiling tile, the grid itself, what that ceiling tile sits in, was existing to remain. So all we were going to be doing was swapping out the ceiling tiles themselves. So the question came up, is it worthwhile at this time to get proposals to replace it? Is it an option maybe to paint it? So because the grid is in, again, good but maybe not spectacular shape, really doesn't warrant it to be completely replaced, but painting was a great option, and given the pricing, that is something that we've included. It is worthwhile to note, you may ask yourself, because the pricing is somewhat significantly different when you look at Iverson Field and Holsing being the lower one at $9,000 compared to the $23,000. It somewhat does pair up with the voluntary alternate, and that has to do with the schedule conflict. So really, when you add the two together, the delta between Dodson and Iverson and Field are significantly less than what may be initially apparent.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting. Just a year ago, I was mentioning before the meeting, we were like, Anupam and I had spent some time driving around putting the signs outside polling places to encourage people to vote yes, because as school board members, we could advocate for the bond, unlike district staff. So it's really exciting to see this. They look great. Like, those additions are going to be so nice for the equity between our schools. I just really appreciate this project. And I would also, again, like to thank the community for their support in this, to bring these additions forward for all of our students. It's just fantastic. And they got my other questions, so I'm good. But it does look great. Thank you so much for this work.
Thank you, and obviously TMP was responsible for putting all those renderings together, so we're all very excited.
All right, we are up to now action item 210352, consider approval of EL1 bid awards, first and final reading. I'm looking for a motion.
Madam President, I move that we consider approval of EL1 bid awards, first and final reading, action item 210352.
Second.
Okay. It is moved by Member Kehoe and seconded by Member Brooks that we consider approval of EL1 bid awards, first and final reading, action item 210352. Would somebody like to discuss this very quickly before we vote?
So this is the bid award for the presentation that we just saw and just discussed. And it's been vetted in the F&O meeting twice.
Okay. And do any of the board members have any questions about this? All right, seeing no questions, I will call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, it passes 6-0. Thank you so very much for all of the hard work, and also to the Finance Committee for all of your hard work. Now we are on to budget survey results. Is that you, Mr. Kehoe?
That is me.
Fantastic.
Wait till it gets up on the screen here. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide, Debbie, do you want me to? Okay, so if we can go to the next slide, I'll explain the process. We start the budget process around this time each year, soliciting input from the community, from the board, from other stakeholders in this process to help us to identify the priorities that the administration is going through as part of the budgeting process. Those priorities get pulled together from the external stakeholders, like the families and the community that provide this input, the conversations that we have here at this meeting, other conversations and discussions that we have as a board, and that helps to influence the administration as they prepare proposed budgets and go through what they call the transformation process. Transformation is where they take in all of that input that's come across the whole district, and they weigh the pros and cons as part of that process, and ultimately come back to the board with a draft budget. And that draft budget has the potential to be adjusted and changed based upon feedback and what we like and what we don't like. But generally, it's directionally correct in terms of where we want to go. And then we go through formal public hearings on the budget process where we present the draft budget. We give the community an opportunity to weigh in on that and to participate in that process. This survey is designed to give us a way to collect input from the community that helps us to drive this budget process. It's far better to get that input now rather than when the budget is already drafted and finalized. So we use this process to help gather those different suggestions and ideas, and then to categorize those things into different areas, and we talk through them here at the board meeting. This will be a little bit different than the way we normally would do a meeting, that I will actually pause after each slide and give a chance for the board and the administration to comment on any of the specific items so that we can have a robust conversation as we're going through this. For those of you that may have seen this presentation, you'll see numbers after each of the process. Those numbers correspond to the raw survey number data that was part of that activity. So you might see a number like 27 or 27 and 8 in parentheses. That means it was response number 27 and response number 8 that both had a similar piece of feedback into that particular idea. So we summarize those things together as part of this process. So it's not, doesn't mean that there were 27 people that asked for that, it's the specific response numbers. So that's a kind of overview of the process. As part of this activity, we've received 28 sets of input from the community, specifically around budget items. We also received 21 responses from the community that were largely around returning to school, but they're unrelated to the budget process. So those won't be included as part of this discussion, and they were largely all the same, returning to school. So we'll start with the first page here, and the first set of feedback was around the extended day community ed programs and a suggestion to request before and after school care, as well as enrichment activities predominantly after school. And this is a common theme that we've seen come before these budget processes, and we've looked to expand those programs every year. We've actually seen some expansion this year with the work that we've done in our cohort care that we've done, and we'll talk about this as we get to the end of this slide. From a nutrition services perspective, there was a request to allow us to continue to provide the free meals that are available for all students regardless of income. That's a program that's been in place during the pandemic time, and it's been supported by the USDA, I believe? Yeah, so the USDA has given us actually the funds to allow us to provide without restriction or qualification free meals available to any student under any circumstances as part of this process. And the economics of that make it so that it's very easy for us to do that because of the funding that's provided from USDA. Although we might like to do this on a go-forward basis, it would be something we would have to evaluate whether we can make that work, because that funding is only in place for this school year. The next category is on the social and emotional supports, and it's an area that really we've received a whole slew of different requests that were particular into this process. The first was around the recognition that in addition to our students and our families that are struggling, oftentimes our staff are also struggling. There is very challenging to provide the constant changing education that's occurring, the demands of remote and simultaneous education, and that some of them have experienced crises in their own lives, and to provide additional support for the staff in addition to the supports that we're providing for students and others in the community. And I think that that's something that's important for us to consider. This next one is around counselors and smaller class sizes. From a counselor's perspective, we've made investments in this over the last couple of years, and it's clear, especially during pandemic times, the needs for those additional support staff and those counselors, and I think it'll be something that we'll want to discuss. With respect to class size is challenging. For every reduction in class size, it costs us about $2 million a year. It is something that we would love to do, but with the current funding model that's in place from the state of Michigan, at least the historic funding model, that would be very challenging for us to make substantial reductions in class size. It is something we would love to consider, but that's likely to be something that's predicated on a substantial change in the funding model that's coming from the state. The next one is related to the social and emotional support. It's school psychologists, social workers, interventionists. It's providing more of that staff across the spectrum, from elementary to middle school to high school, a desire to provide more of that social and emotional support. This next one here is around the IEP, or special education advocates, to assist parents and families that are navigating the special education process. It is a challenging process, and we've heard from people in the community that it is hard to understand what's necessary to get your student evaluated for an IEP or for a 504. There are sometimes private firms that are available that provide support for that process, but there may be opportunities for the district to provide additional support for those in that type of activity. Mental health and academic supports is another common theme in this particular request. And the next one is around changing the start times for the high school level. Changing the start times for the high school is something we've discussed as a board for a number of years. We're likely to reinvigorate that conversation here this year, because we really have seen the benefit of that when we were able to adjust those start times when we were in virtual only education, and we want to explore how we can make this happen. For those of you that are watching, it's very challenging with a 3-tier bus system and all the other activities that are going on, but it is something we are committed to as a board to look at, and we will likely be having some more conversations on how to make that happen. What are the issues and trade-offs to be able to explore as part of it? And then the last area in here is, again, on more counselors and mental health resources. So that same topic around counselors and mental health supports. So I've obviously editorialized a little bit as I went along. Are there feedback from other board members on any of these specific topics, or input that you'd want to give to the administration to help in their evaluation, or feedback from the administration?
We'll just start down there with Mr. Wilson. We'll just go this way.
I'm sorry, say that again.
So we'll just, like, for this, you, Laura, and Anupam, Doug, and then I will go.
Got you. Yeah, no real questions, Patrick. I mean, I think the feedback speaks for itself. It's trends that we know that we're seeing, especially around social and emotional, the need to increase the support in that area. So I think the presentation that we, went through in SPA is very timely around this. So I think that this is really good feedback to receive. I would assume that issues like equity is really a through line that goes through all of these items that are presented here. How are we adding these components to the budget in an equitable way? That's the only thing that I kind of saw that jumped on my radar that I know we've heard a lot about. I know as a board we've talked a lot about when we did our visioning session a few weeks ago. That was something significant. But other than that, I think it's spot on what we're hearing in the community.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions or clarifications. I just want to echo what Trustee Wilson said and say, it seems very timely. I'm glad that we're asking for this feedback before we actually make that budget, proposed budget, because you can just see the depth and breadth of all the suggestions and how they really correlate. So
That's just my observation.
So just as a point of feedback, these are suggestions that come from the community. If there's something in particular that you think is particularly important on this process, I think that we need to make sure that we let the administration know, either formally now in this meeting or informally afterwards as part of an email back to the process. So I just don't want us to say that these are all things that we're going to do. These are the raw suggestions or the summarized suggestions from the community versus something that we say that we specifically want to do.
Thank you. A couple of things to lift, as everyone's mentioned, this topic of the support of social emotional support for students and staff. We've been talking about this for a number of years, and one of the things, as you mentioned, we have invested more in support with counselors and social workers. So one of the questions that came up with SPA was, where are we with the number of counselors, school psychologists, and social workers? So just getting the numbers right now, where we're at. We know the need is there. How much can we grow our current base is one of my biggest questions. Is, again, there's this huge need. How many more people can we add on to support our students and staff would be one of my questions. The other piece is something that you mentioned, Member Kehoe, which is reducing class sizes. So to also Member Wilson's point, when you look at equity, not every class size needs to be decreased by one. So where is the need the greatest? So one of the things I'd like to cost out is looking at classes where the student support is the greatest, and how can we reduce those class sizes to get kids up to grade level? And for us, that's critical. Getting all kids to be at grade level is, our goal. So can we look at where that need is from K-12 and start to cost that out?
It's a term that's used sometimes as an asymmetric investment. So we make an additional investment in where there's the greatest need.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, I think this is critical, and we definitely need to have more conversations and look at where the investment needs to be. But thanks for lifting this.
Doug, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Okay. So I understand that, for the free meals that we are getting some money in order to do that. And I'm wondering how much, it would cost not for all students, but there's always that, there's children who qualify for free meals, and then there's people that are just above that, and how much that would cost, and if there would be a way we could provide meals for those families at the end of the pandemic.
It's a great question. Debbie, is there any way that we can identify who we're serving right now? Because if we know how many we're serving at this time versus how many we would serve historically for those that might have qualified for that, we can potentially estimate what the additional cost might be in supporting that process.
So I will work with our nutritional director who is...
I don't think your mic is on.
You don't think that's on?
Oh, it is. It's okay now.
Yep. So Kristen Hennessy is our director of nutritional services, and we'll work with her to determine that. But right now, the feeding program is providing a meal for those who want. And so she has a food distribution program on Wednesdays right now here at Salem High School. And then we also provide meals now with elementary and middle school who are all in session. So it is a challenging year to do data collection because we've had so many changes in the way we're educating children this year. So we might want to go back a year hence to get those information on a non-COVID year to figure that out, but we'll do that. We know that there's a lot of needs still out in the community, and we also know that we're not serving nearly as many families as we used to when we were full in face-to-face.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I would also like to make sure that we keep the idea of having enough, social emotional support for our students. And in addition to like the class sizes as a targeted amount, if we could make sure if we need additional interventionists in those same areas to move the children forward, that would be great also.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are great things. And we've been getting some preliminary information from the state on budgets for next year. And we may have some additional resources to be able to help us make up for some of the potential learning loss that we've seen this last year. So obviously I would like us to, as we're going through the budget process, regardless of whether we get additional money or not, to evaluate that as part of the process next year and say, how can we support in summer programs, how can we support in fall programs, whether it be reduced class sizes, whether it be asymmetrical investments in specific schools or classes that are experiencing greater learning loss. How can we bring those things forward, including the social and emotional support? So I mean, I know that it's going to be tough to be able to do that because there's a lot of things that are changing, but I think we want to make sure that we're supporting the community in this process.
I just want to add to that conversation, when you look at the cost, you mentioned $2 million a year to reduce class size by one child in each class. And so that's ideal. Again, we want to have smaller class sizes. We know there's a lot of personalization and relationship building that happens, but knowing that cost, it's not attainable. It's not realistic until we have a better funding formula, as you mentioned. So as I mentioned with regard to equity, there's still a large need when you look at how big our school district is. So I guess my brain is just thinking a little bit more with, can we identify tiers of support where the greatest need is, I'm just throwing this out there because I don't know, this is not, my research, but let's say the greatest need is with pre-K 2. That's where you need to have the most support for smaller class sizes, interventionists, as you mentioned, because that's all we can invest in right now, and then continue to grow that until we get more funding or more equitable funding. So rather than taking a look at the whole system, which again is huge, and we may not be able to support that entire shift, can we look at phases? And so where is that greatest need at the elementary level? Where is that greatest need in the middle school level and at the high school level?
It's great feedback, Newfoundland. And we already have smaller class sizes at the lower L level. So we've already done some of that work as an organization, but there's certainly an opportunity for us to evaluate more and to see where the greatest need is.
I do want to add, when we're looking at class sizes in this upcoming budget, it's going to be important also to look through a health and safety lens.
Yeah.
So we know that we can all assume that we will not be post-pandemic in the fall, and we would love to be able to not go backwards as long as we're not experiencing greater numbers of surge within our community. So to be able to start right away with in-person learning, it would be important for us to be able to have our staffing in a manner such that we can still achieve a minimum standard of 3 feet, if that's still the requirement. And so right now, even with the prediction that we're each year, we were already scheduled to lose about 150 to 200 students just based on birth rate, but still wanting to look at, and that's going to be different. So to your point, some schools, in order to achieve that class size, you may have 22 students in a class. In another school, it might be 24 students. So really looking at staffing at that level, individualized based on making sure that we can come into the fall achieving that adequate spacing for in-person. So that is a priority also this year.
That's great.
Yeah,
feedback.
if I could as well, I think this is a critical budget because we know that education has been disrupted and we know that there's going to be significant changes over the next 3 to 5 years. And I think the districts that make bets in specific areas around those changes, around the innovations that came out of COVID, I think that those are the districts that are going to set themselves up to win long term. So one thing I would love to see in the budget is, where are we looking to place big bets, calculated strategic bets on where we see education going. So we have to turn into futurists to a certain extent. But we're going to see an increase in funding, obviously, and we're seeing it now for the next couple years, but then you're going to see that funding go away, and you could actually see funding cut. And so the bets we make now and where we spend our money now is going to really dictate how successful we are in 3 to 5 years. So when I look at a budget, it tells the story of where we see ourselves going in the future. And so I would love to see those items be able to be called out to say, we're investing in this because we believe this is where education is going, and that's why we're making a significant investment in these areas.
Superintendent Merritt brought up an excellent point that, again, you kind of come back to reality in that we are still in the middle of a pandemic, and you're absolutely right, Superintendent Merritt, we are not going to be out of the woods in the fall. So we've been having these statewide discussions with medical experts, with the governor's work, and they anticipate another year of this fluctuation until we have herd immunity, which is when the kids can be vaccinated. So the phases are happening right now. High school kids may be able to be vaccinated in the fall, but then you're doing the trickle-down effect with testing and then vaccinating, testing and vaccinating. So with that said, looking ahead now and having this conversation about what do we want fall to look like, and to make a commitment to our teachers and kids that we want to create the safest environment. And right now we're doing with what we have, which is, again, not ideal. So I think about Livonia. Early on in the fall, they hired 30 teachers to break up their largest class sizes. And now their class sizes are averaging about 20, 21 for all levels. So I think if we have that target in our minds, and again, depending on space as well, because some classrooms are smaller, I think this conversation needs more detail with regard to the class sizes, what's the number that we want to reduce class sizes by, where's the need the greatest, and I'm not sure what that entails for your staff to get those numbers for us.
We already have started. Mr. Tiskowitz has worked with each principal as we've gone just for our mitigation strategies to say how many students in a room equals 6 feet, how many students equal 3 feet. And so he's already done some initial staffing numbers. And once again, that will differ from building, from grade level. So you may have one building where a grade level can achieve 25 and another building where you can only have 22. So he's done some preliminary work to see. And there would be an increase in FTE required for that, but would definitely be worth the increase, because then we can know going into the fall, we don't even have to use the language of safe start. It's either your choice is virtual academy or just regular school, traditional school, not say regular school, but.
Yep, absolutely.
And just a reminder for everybody is that we've made a commitment that if the need is there and the want is there, we are committed to continuing our virtual academy in the fall as well.
So we did an initial survey, and definitely there's an interest, and that was not a commitment. We just kind of wanted to gauge if we did have an interest for offering the virtual academy, and absolutely, we still have quite a few family members that are interested, so we would like to move forward as a part of this budget to offer a virtual academy.
Great feedback, great discussion. I know it's a little informal in terms of how we normally run these presentations, but I think the discussion is powerful. So our next section here is around maintenance and custodial. The first piece of feedback was on turning off the parking lights between midnight and 5 a.m., unplugging electrical items, and in using motion detector lights. It was all designed around energy saving. And I think that we've already implemented a lot of energy savings activities throughout the district over the last 5 to 10 years to reduce the loads that's there. Sometimes things like turning parking lights off are kept on for safety and for security purposes. But it certainly is something that we take a look at it as both as part of the renovations that we're doing. So for example, the renovations that we're doing in the 4 elementary schools will have upgrades to their lighting equipment that will save money as part of that process. And we just spoke about that in the previous presentation. But these are absolutely things that we look at both when we're making big capital improvements as well as finding opportunities to do savings across the district. And I'm sure that this will be continued as part of the work that's happening. The next item here is around redesigning, updating, refurbishing, and expanding the high schools. This request was also targeted to the middle schools, and as part of the bond program, every building in the district is being revisited with expansions and updates and improvements as part of that process. We're actually in the design process right now to add refurbish the theater at Salem High School, as well as to add a pool at Plymouth High School, as well as other updates across these schools. So this is absolutely part of the bond program and the work that we're doing. The next one here is around teaching and learning, curriculum and instruction. And this is where we actually have the most number of suggestions. This goes on to 2 pages as part of this process. And the first item here was around investing in classes and curriculum and educating to be good stewards of the environment, helping students to recognize their role in the environment process and the impact that they can have. The next one was around offering a Japanese language program, so really expanding our foreign language processes that were there. We oftentimes see suggestions on here to invest and to expand our music and arts programs, the recognition that those programs have on the students that we have, especially as part of their social and emotional process. So it's one of those things that we continuously see in these budget surveys. The number of suggestions here, I think this is the greatest number of suggestions that we had across the survey. So there was definitely a concerted effort to emphasize what we call the Religious Diversity Journey Program. So the Journeys program is a program that runs at the middle school level that exposes a select number of students to different religions throughout the community, and it's really been very, very well received. I think we recently had a student that was profiled as part of that process in, I don't remember.
One Detroit.
Yeah, One Detroit. So it's just a fantastic program that's really been well received, and they're advocating for us to continue and expand that. The next item here is on funding the improvements to our STEM education. We've done a lot of investments on STEM over the last years in adding dedicated STEM labs at the middle school levels, and as part of the budget process, we will be actually adding a dedicated activities in STEM space that will be as part of the park that we're doing here. So this is an area that our capital programs would continue to look at. Do you guys want me to go to the last page of teaching and learning items, or do you want to talk about this slide first?
It's up to you.
Okay. I'll hit the next page, and then we'll finish with those and discuss these items on maintenance, custodial, and teaching and learning. So the second set of teaching and learning items is adding life skill classes like budgeting, planning, credit management, investing 101, understanding mortgage risk-benefit analysis, Lean Six Sigma training, return on investment or ROI analysis. Some of those ones are actually already encompassed as part of our programs that we offer at the middle school level around our life skills programs. And there's the potential for some of those later ones like risk-benefit analysis, Lean Six Sigma, and return on investment that could be incorporated in the new business academy that we just started rolling out. I believe it's this year. And so there's some good opportunities to consider whether those might be part of the business process that occurs there. A related item here for curriculum around planning for financial future and understanding real-life finances. Again, I think it's somewhat covered in our life skills curriculum that we have already. A review of our curriculum and teaching practices to ensure we're teaching from a lens of equity and a holistic paradigm. This is near and dear to many of the board members' hearts, and myself included, and it is something that's very much a focus in the work that we're doing going forward as we review and update our dynamic plan. So I think you'll see that be incorporated in almost everything that we do, of how we include that as part of the process. The next item here is on eliminating the TAG program and working those classes through all schools so all students can benefit from advanced classes when able, not just TAG students. This is a common theme that comes up oftentimes in these surveys, and we've done a lot of work over the last 5 to 10 years in expanding our differentiation and advanced offerings that we have in our home schools, because we recognize that TAG is not always a fit for everybody, but TAG has also been a very good program for many of the for many students as part of that program where they're not able to find their needs met and where they're able to meet with their peers in that program. It's also brought many students to the district as part of that process, and it's generally been an attractive program for us. So I think that we will absolutely continue to expand our offerings through all the home schools, but I don't think at this point there's any plans to eliminate the TAG program. This next item here is on providing dyslexia training and Orton-Gillingham-style lessons for all reading teachers. And this is beyond me. I know the dyslexia, but I don't understand this other piece, so I would defer
It's a
to the
program.
educators. Pardon?
Orton Gillingham,
Yes.
it's like a method, a program. It's a specific way of training and delivering instruction.
Okay, cool. So feedback, start with you, Sean, if there's any on these items that we just talked about.
No, just, well, I guess a couple of questions. The first one is, since it's my first year going through the budget process, can you just talk a little bit more about the process overall, so we're getting the community feedback, and then, yeah. Thank you.
Debbie knows the timeline. I know the events.
So this is the first step in gathering information. So we use it as an input sessions to have community input into the budget process. Then what happens is I'll bring you back some assumptions. We'll talk about those at F&O, and then we'll bring them to the full Board of Education and what we're going to assume as part of our budget process. As you know, Michigan Public Schools are June 30th year ends, and you by law under the Uniform Budgeting Act have to adopt a budget by June 30. Unfortunately, the state of Michigan is a 9/30 year end, so they don't have to come back to a budget until September the 30th, and therein lies the rub in Michigan funding, in that they have more time than you in order to consider where we are. Now, there'll be a May CREC, which is a Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference. That conference will take the governor's idea of where we are as a state, the state Senate and the state House, and they will all come together in consensus in order to provide that information in order to draft budgets and appropriations for Michigan Public Schools for the following fiscal year. So stay tuned. You're going to see a lot more of me for the next several months. It culminates in our first blush of a budget in May, the public hearing in June, and then the final budget adoption, that last board meeting in June. So you'll see me probably on the next 7 board meetings, probably 4 or 5 of those.
Okay, great. So we'll have plenty of opportunity for input.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And Sean, now's the time for the board, just like this was an opportunity for the community to provide their input on the priorities. Because the administration's going to start preparing this budget using the feedback that we provide, the things that we think are particularly important, and the things that we've shared from the community that are important as part of this process. So either in this meeting, through board emails, if we think that we need to have a special workshop, we can do that. Those are all ways that we can provide formal and informal feedback to the administration on our budget priorities.
Yeah, just what dawns on me is that a lot of these things are right on top of each other, and they're really at a critical point. And what I mean by that is we're, right in the middle, well, not in the middle, kind of at the beginning of a new 5-year dynamic plan, which, resources follow vision, right? And so to a certain extent, I feel like we're behind from that standpoint, and we're in a moment where we probably have to act agile as the board. So as we know, the board sets the vision for the district, right? And then the superintendent implements that vision. And so we may have to look at moving a little bit more agile and maybe doing a special session around visioning so that we can provide at least a vision for the summer and the fall, right? That then leads into the overall dynamic plan, because it's hard for me to conceptualize some of these in buckets, isolated buckets, versus really looking at our strategic priorities. I know we have some right now, but I also, to my point earlier, things have been disrupted. And so I think we really have to look at that vision holistically. So that'll probably be a recommendation I make at the end, is to do a special session with the board around visioning so that we can provide some clarity to the superintendent and the district as a whole. And then the last thing I would just share is, not falling for when you look at all these wraparound services, I guess is what I'm going to call them, and you see a lot of districts moving in that direction, I think partnerships is definitely the way to go, because if you do have, if a lot of times you can fall victim to building up your capacity and your infrastructure to support those things and trying to do everything as a district yourself, versus if we go with strategic partnerships, then if we do have to reduce, we're reducing strategic partners versus specific staff and things of those nature. So that was just something that caught my eye as feedback, is calling out where we're going to provide the services ourselves and do these things, and where we're going to seek to bring in strategic partners.
Lauren, anything
Yeah,
from
my
you?
turn. Okay, so a couple things I want to kind of pull out from the teaching and learning section, you know, that really are kind of layered or related. You know, the investing in the music and art programs and funding needed improvements to STEM education. So, you know, across many districts, we see a lot of investment in STEM or STEAM or STREAM. There's, you know, multiple acronyms there, but it's really that, you know, that cross-pollinization and that project-based learning that's really happening. And I love that we've invested in that in the middle school level. And I'd love to see us expand that, you know, even elementary up to the high school level. And I just think, you know, that art component is really a part of that STEAM too, and that's what, or STEM. And that, I think, makes a richer educational experience. And I think we need to be on par with other districts who are already doing that too. Go ahead. Yeah.
Both Member Wilson and Christensen bring up excellent points, and pulling these pieces together does make more sense as opposed to having these as separate siloed initiatives. So some of the questions that I'd like to dig into is the investment in music and arts program. I feel like we already do that, and so to what degree are we doing that so we can better educate the community? So if some community members are feeling out there that we need to invest more into music and art, so where are we, and how do we need to grow that?
In the EL1 package that you just adopted earlier this evening, were actually the creation of 4 new art rooms and 4 music spaces. Doesn't necessarily need to be a music space, because the music in these buildings, Dotson, Erickson, Field, and Hulsing, are on their stages, but there are additional classrooms in those spaces. So you are investing in the arts and the music in that fashion. And then, as Member Kehoe mentioned earlier, Salem Theater is going to have a huge expansion to it, as well other spaces in the whole system from cradle to grave. But we'll get through those eventually. But yes, we are making large investments in those programs from a facilities standpoint.
Excellent. So I think this is part of a larger conversation that we've had with telling our story. How do we better tell our story with where we're at and where we're going? And this is a big piece of it that Debbie just shared. Because, you know, we talked about it last year, and I totally forgot about it. And so thanks for bringing that back up. And then some of the other questions, well, so let me just back up and say all of these are great ideas. And to dig into 1 or 2 right now it does seem overwhelming. So to go back to what Member Wilson said with the visioning work, one of the things we talked about in our SPA meeting was actually looking at a summer committee of the whole, or meeting of the whole, where we could all get together as board members to talk about where do we want curriculum instruction and assessment to be as a district moving forward. What do we want the programs to look like? Where do we want our kids to be? How do we invest in our teachers? And so rather than just Member Wilson and I leading that discussion in isolation, I think this is a perfect time for us to talk about that as a whole as we're looking at curriculum and instruction. So rather than putting that off to the summer, what I'm going to try to do is now, if we can pull it into our schedule in the next month.
Yeah, the sooner the better, because the budget process has already begun. So if we're going to make radical changes to what's happening, we need to provide that feedback sooner rather than later.
So if we were to, so this is a logistical question, President McCoyne. If we were to have a special SPA meeting of the whole, could we deviate from our normal schedule of having that April, the first Wednesday of each month? Could we add another, like a Saturday workshop for the board? We can? Okay.
Yeah, we can add something up. Yeah, we
Right.
can add a special meeting or a workshop.
Okay, so we'll look at our calendars then.
It's a great idea.
I'm sorry, so when are we looking at doing the special meeting? I was
So-
only catching some of,
So when we go into our discussion at the end,
yeah.
what I'll do is bring up some dates.
Okay.
Since, as Member Kehoe said, we have to really talk about this sooner than later.
Move quickly, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, looking at these lists, these are very good lists of subjects that the public has come up with, but we have some, I have some ideas that I think that I could add to this. When you talk about need improvements to STEM education, we also need to look at other things like vocational education for those students who don't really want to become engineers or mathematicians or, scientists, because they've found their place in the area that they live at doing a certain thing. Like, one thing we do is mechanics, auto mechanics and painting, and that's part of it. But there's other things we need to look at. Like, you really need to find out what's out there that kids, students can find a job with. Now, I took, when I went to school, I took electronics and pre-engineering and that, but I found myself in the service industry. And the servicing is not even touched, where we actually show people how to service. Now, in the secondary, like at Schoolcraft or Henry Ford, they taught you how to fix furnaces and things that you could find a job out there. And some people like that, so we need to develop curriculums that I think that would be tailored to not just auto mechanics and car painting, to other forms of jobs, because there's a lot of different types of jobs out there. And for the past many years, we've been wanting our students to go to college and become doctors, lawyers, scientists, and the really higher education, but there's a lot of areas where they don't need that much education to get a good job and work. So those jobs are basically disappearing, and there's much need for them now out there. So, we should kind of think about it and focus on providing those types of educations for those students that kind of fall away from education, and then they get a job in a factory or they get a job at Walmart or whatever. But you can nurture those minds that have, like I say, they march to the beat of a different drummer. And if you can get in that rhythm with them, they can learn something that really they love, and they can make a decent wage and living out of. So that's one thing that I'd like to bring up. The other one was also music. There's a lot of students out there that just really love music, and they don't want to, go. They want to reach a certain level of education, and just provide people with music to, comfort. And I just think that we should kind of look at different other subjects, not just the usual subjects that kids learn in. We need to at least look what's available out in the public, in the world, to choose. Like, this other one with the Japanese language, and that there's a lot of other languages out there that students can learn other than French, Spanish, German, just what we've been doing, what we've been teaching for many, many years. just like a handful of the typical languages, but you know, there's hundreds of languages out there, and like with equity, you know, you have people in your neighborhood, you have people in your communities that speak different languages, and if we could offer any kind of means of language support and teaching of those languages that are in the neighborhood, in our area, instead of, you know, like French. Like I took French and thought, you know, it was great because we're next to Canada and I could speak French to French Canadians and that, but I ended up working in Chicago for a few years and they all spoke Spanish. So it would have, you know, it would have been better if I learned Spanish.
Yeah,
You know, so if you're in a neighborhood that has a majority of people speaking different languages, that it would be better to set up programs that they could learn those typical languages that are in their own environment, or anything that they always wanted to. My daughter is from Russia, and she really wanted to find a class to learn how to speak Russian, and there wasn't anything in the district. She ended up she was over at Starkweather, and she, through her own effort, created a program teaching Russian to students. She put together a whole program to show as a project, and it was really hard to understand why it took a student to recognize that we needed that type of a foreign language, class. So I think we should, these lists that we get from the survey are great, but I think we really need to focus on, the equity, what we have in the area, of the needs of education for those students who just choose not to become, mathematicians, scientists, or engineers, and because there's a big need for it. And like I said, there's a lot of those jobs that are going away because nobody wants them, because it was never emphasized, in their education. So I don't want to start rambling right now, but
that's great feedback, Doug. And
I just would like to see that. And Mr. Wilson talks about the vision. I think, with our vision, we would like to not just have people be in the 50th percentile. We would like to have our students in the higher percentiles of knowledge, so we're more how can I say, available to new students in the future.
Doug, I think those are fantastic ideas, and I think in that workshop that's been discussed, it'd be a great way for us to bring those things forward and talk about them in more depth. And just a reminder for everybody, these are feedback that came from the community. This is just, in general, it's one person or one or two people that are providing this. These are not things that we have to action, but it's feedback that helps us to inform us as to what the community has found that was important to them. So go ahead.
So I will keep the rest of my ideas till we have our workshop, except for I would like to lift up the Religious Diversity Journey Program and see if there's a way we could expand that, because it really is, I think, an excellent program that at this point doesn't serve a lot of the students. Because they had to redo their program this year and they couldn't take all the students on a field trip, they took like one or two into these houses of worship, and the children were able to ask questions. And they were shown on One Detroit, which is on, the Detroit PBS. And so I watched them, and it was really interesting what they were asking, and I think it would be just a good program if we could expand it for more students.
Yeah, agreed. I've heard such great things about that program. So, And Doug, I think your ideas were great. I think we need to definitely have that deeper conversation as a board, and also an opportunity for us to be refreshed as a board about what programs are available and how we choose things. 'Cause we've had some other conversations about new sports that want to be added or other new classes, and what's the process that we go through to do that? Because a lot of it is a function of interest and whether you can source an educator to support the program. So, but it's definitely, I think it's a good refresher for new board members and for all of us as part of that budget process. So our last slide, I don't know if we lose our presenter. And there's two topics here that are very much related. One is stop running the buses that are mostly empty, that families opt out of getting on the bus, and that we build the routes around those who are actually using it. Another one around educating the community on the cost involved in transportation and asking them to opt out if they're not going to use it. So Debbie, did you have something to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the stop running buses that are mostly empty. So this year has been obviously a cohorted year, so between the blue and the green cohorts for all of the various levels of students. And so it may have looked like buses were running empty, but now that we're slowly coming back through elementary and middle, those buses are filling up. So I just wanted to remind us of that. That could have been a comment by someone watching earlier in the year.
Right. I do think it is worthwhile for us to explore an opt-in process or a way to be able to allow people to do that, because I know that everybody gets assigned a bus based upon their distance and whether they're eligible to do that. And so sometimes we have a potential to be able to balance those based upon those that actually have need.
Correct.
And then, of course, we'd have to have the flexibility to be able to add people back in, which is one of the challenges, that if they started needing the bus at a later date. But I think it is worthwhile to talk about this in the budget process.
Yeah, usually you do count date in the second or third week of October, but because we weren't in-person instruction at that point, that was delayed. And so I believe Kelly and staff are going to do that next week. This week was difficult because we have a half day tomorrow and a half day on Thursday as well. So I think we're going to do those counts next week and then adjust.
Okay, great, thank you. Any feedback on this topic?
None.
Newcomb?
Yes, one of the numbers I'd like to get around transportation, and it actually ties to a previous topic, is running a third or a parallel tier for the high school. So if we're going to look at delayed start time, I think it's important for everybody to know what that costs. So initially, just let's cost it out and have that number for the community, because some people think it's, just run some more buses and, look at the cost of it and for the buses as well as the number of drivers needed and how long that can be sustained. But as we talk more about late start time, we can have other conversations about other ways of achieving that. But I feel like this is like an easy number for Debbie and the team to pull out with having a parallel track for high school.
So pre-COVID, we had 3 tiers. Each tier was between 76 and 77 routes, which means 76 to 77 drivers, which means 76 to 77 buses. So each tier, high school, middle school, elementary school, had that number out, and that was just gen ed. And then there was special transportation for special services and others added to that. So all total, we had over 110 staff, I believe. And so if you add a 4th tier, then that means there's somebody coming home after 5 o'clock, more like between 5 and 6.
Or we need to have more buses and more drivers, and the challenge with hiring them to run shorter routes. So I think what I'd like to see us do is have a conversation, probably whether it's part of that meeting or a separate meeting, to talk about how we might facilitate late start times or those options without, because before it's always been trying to make it so that it was cost neutral. And I think that we would like to understand what the cost would be in those different options, even if it wasn't cost neutral. I'm sorry. Doug, I'm sorry.
We had actually already kind of discussed that, and it's already kind of on Ms. Merritt's radar. Right now, they're working on getting the kids back to school, but we did
100%.
discuss the idea of not having a cost-neutral one, because there would be, in addition to the buses, if you take all of your drivers and cut their hours, you're gonna have to raise their wages to keep the current staff.
Yeah,
You know,
there's a lot of challenges. That's,
there certainly
if
are.
this was
yeah.
easy, we would have done it a long
Yeah.
time ago. So I think we've had our discussion as we went along. Monica, Ms. Merritt, I'm sorry, I don't know if you have any feedback that you wanted to weigh in on.
No, I think this is always a good discussion. As you talk about process, it's the first opportunity at having the community weigh in on priorities or things that they feel are as important, and then having board have an opportunity to really shape that discussion so we can build assumptions going forward. Appreciate that process of doing a separate meeting to talk through those. We also need to re-engage with Leander and continue our work with dynamic planning. So as you were talking about that, I'm thinking that might be a good time to bring him back into when we look at those dates, so that we can do that visioning work and align those priorities within the budget. So I just think it's a really good start, and always appreciate the feedback.
All right, we are now down to letter E, which is citizens' comments. I have not gotten any forms. Is there any citizens' comments? All right, we will move on. We are down to action items and discussion. We have several topics for this. The first topic is, as was announced earlier, Member Savage has resigned, so we need to fill his seat. And by law and policy, we have 30 days in order to fill that seat. If we do not fill it, then Wayne Risa will make an appointment. So generally speaking, the way we have worked it is interested members of the community submit a letter of interest with their qualifications, and it would go to Diane Robertson, and this will be on the website, so people don't have to be writing it down. Diane Robertson, and that would be by Friday, March 19th, 2021 at 4 o'clock. So that the board members can then get those things and kind of review the materials ahead of time. Then interested candidates are invited to interview, and it looks like it's probably March 24th at 7. So each person gets 2 to 3 minutes to give their qualifications, why they're interested in the school board. Then the board ranks their candidates 1, 2, 3, and then the top several advance to the next round, and the counting is done, the tabulation is done by not a board member, so that we don't actually see those rankings, and that way the people who move forward, nobody knows if they were like the top or the second, so it's a little fair that way. Then we interview those candidates individually with a predetermined list of questions that everybody is asked the same questions so that it's completely fair. Then we vote again, and from that we will get the candidate that will be appointed to the board. They will be sworn in, and then they will get all of the information at that point. So this will be posted also on the website. If people have additional questions, they're free to reach out to someone on the board. Patrick and Doug and I have all participated in this in the past. So that's pretty much the information on that. The second thing we have is we have the resolution that we added to the agenda at the beginning, and it is a resolution regarding a Freedom of Information Act appeal. And I will read the resolution because it is not in the packet, because we just got this. This is a resolution regarding Freedom of Information Act appeal. A regular meeting of the Board of Education of Plymouth-Canton Schools was held March 9th, 2020 at 7 o'clock, and then it tells who was here. The following preamble and resolution were offered by member and supported by member. Whereas the board received a Freedom of Information Act FOIA appeal from a denial of certain requested documents on February 9th, 2021, and whereas pursuant to the district's FOIA policy, being policy number 8310A, the district issued a 10 business day extension to respond to the FOIA appeal by March 9th, 2021, and whereas the board has had the opportunity to review the FOIA appeal, and whereas the board has determined that the documents requested are exempt pursuant to MCL 15.243(1)G, and whereas the board has determined that the requester who filed the appeal did not provide a basis to release the requested documents, therefore be it resolved that the board denies the FOIA appeal because the records requested are exempt from disclosure pursuant to MCL 15.243(1)G. The board further denies the FOIA appeal because the requester has not provided a basis for which the exempt documents should be provided to the requester. The board directs the superintendent to provide notice to the requester that the FOIA appeal has been denied and to provide the requester with a copy of this resolution along with all other information required to be provided to the requester pursuant to policy 8310A. All other resolutions and parts of resolutions insofar as they conflict with the provisions of this resolution are hereby rescinded. So I am looking for a motion for a resolution regarding Freedom of Information Act appeal, and it is action item 210353.
Madam President, I move that we approve the resolution regarding Freedom of Information Act appeal, action item 210353.
Okay, can I get a second?
Second?
Was that you, Newcomb?
Yes.
Thank you. So it was motioned by member Kehoe and seconded by member Sidhu. And I will call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 6-0. Thank you. All right, so we are done with that topic. Member Sidhu.
Yes. Actually, I have a clarifying question for the interviews that are going to be taking place on the 24th.
Okay.
Just so the public knows, are these going to be in person or via Zoom?
We hadn't really discussed that yet.
Okay.
I mean, we're meeting in person. I would assume that we're meeting in person, if
Yeah,
we're allowed to.
Yeah, since we are allowed to meet in person now, I don't think, the order's not going to change by then, is it?
No.
Oh, good. So yeah, we could meet in person.
Excuse me, may I ask a clarifying question about the website posting? What exactly are we asking applicants or interested people to provide? Is it a letter of interest, a resume, all the above?
So, in the past, people have turned in a letter of interest. Some have attached resumes, some have attached other supporting documents, but more along the lines of a letter of, like, why am I qualified? Why do I want to do this?
Okay, excellent. We'll reflect that in the website posting.
Yeah. So, some people have turned in a lot of things. I don't think we need that many things, but more things that would support why they are qualified to be a school board member.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for, so it's in person, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Would we want to remain here, or, so we still have the 25-person limit. The reason we're here versus the boardroom is it gives us the opportunity to have other spaces in the event that we have more than 25 people.
Yeah.
So would you like to see, we have to make sure this is available. but-
If this is available, I think it's a good idea for us to do it here.
we'll make sure and check on availability
Okay,
first,
yeah.
and if it's not available, we'll communicate that and find another site.
Yeah.
Okay. Time, I believe, it was 7 o'clock that you stated, President McCoy?
7 o'clock, because there is, what we did-
I can do it.
yeah, there was, don't you have a meeting prior to
I
that?
have an EEF meeting.
Yeah,
that-
EEF meeting.
I have an EEF meeting that runs till,
I think you said 7.
it runs till 7. I'll cut out a little bit early and drive over here.
What date is it now?
24th?
24th, okay.
All right, and then did you want to try to nail down a date for your committee of the whole?
Yeah, and I'm wondering if we can actually combine that with Member Wilson's visioning session. So in the morning, we can have that, and then in the afternoon, we can talk about the future of what we want curriculum instruction to look like, student programs, teacher support, all of that in the afternoon.
So one thing, a couple of things going on here. I think that, once again, going to the consultant would guide you in the visioning work for the dynamic plan. So we want to make sure that we include that process on that same date. And then I know that parallel to that, we're doing the learning profile, which the board needs to be updated on that as well. So it would really be probably helpful if we try to do a full day and kind of bring in all of those elements at the same time.
That sounds like a great idea.
So a Saturday would probably be really a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're looking to do something all in one day, basically, with the contractor who we brought in around the strategic plan, the dynamic plan, and then what else during that day?
So remember, we had 2 parallel pieces. So through teaching and learning, which was going to be parallel to our dynamic plan, is that work to create our learner profile, the profile of a graduate. So what do we expect K-12 to a graduate of P-CCS to accomplish? So we need to bring the board up to speed with the work that has gone to date, and that was going to be a piece that we wanted to link to our dynamic planning process. So it really kind of connects that work. So it might be good to try to include that in that same conversation.
Right, and I think the visioning of SPA actually fits perfectly with that, because as you look at student needs as they're graduating into the future, what do we need to do to support that and create that environment? So I know it seems like a lot to pack in that one day, but I guess for the SPA side of this conversation, we could have the initial visioning session coupled by the learner profile and talk about the immediate needs for the budget for this year. And then talk about a future visioning session for future programs. Is that, because the budget issue is something that's critical for Member Kehoe and the team to look at. So I don't want to stall that. So let's get that taken care of. And then we can talk about future student programs during the summer. So we're looking at Saturdays. And then one clarifying question for you, Member Wilson. With the visioning conversation that you started, about how much time were you thinking about that?
So if we could have maybe 2 hours
Okay.
for that conversation, does
So-
that work?
2 hours for that with the learner profile, Superintendent Merritt. Do you think an hour or 2?
So I need to touch base with Ms. Rail, because I don't, she's leading that
Okay.
work with the team, so I can get back to you on that.
Okay. All right, so Saturdays really just leaves us with the 20th in the month of March, because the 27th is the start of spring break.
There's this Saturday, isn't there?
We-
Or can we not move that fast?
I don't know if
Yeah.
Superintendent Merritt can move the
So
schedules
Saturday,
that fast with
yeah.
her team.
And also I need to talk to Leander as
Okay.
well to find out.
All right, so let's get 2 dates. What about March 20th as the first date? Okay, and if that doesn't work for our presenters, what about April 10th?
April 10th sounds good, and probably would be good time for
Yeah.
all of the parties that we're talking about. I probably need to put that as a priority as the first.
Okay.
Both dates are fine for me. March 20th and April 10th.
Yeah,
April 10th would give us the ability to have a new board member be available and included in the conversation, which
Yeah.
I think might be helpful, instead of having somebody come in and say, oh, we already did all the work.
Right, no, good point.
Will that give, Ms. Merritt, will that give you enough time to incorporate that vision into the fall return to learn strategy? Okay. And then I will say, I need to double check because I may actually be traveling that weekend, so I need to double check that.
Would you want to also try as a second date then, April 17th as well?
That works for me.
Yes, that works.
So do you want that to be the first preference
If
for
I
you?
could email, I should be able to figure it out tomorrow by noon, if I'm going to be traveling. I'm a coach for travel football, so I think we might be going on a tournament, so I need to double check that.
All right, did anybody have anything else they wanted to discuss while we are here? And,
I just want to say, I like being here in person. I like the opportunity to meet in person, and I think it makes it for a better discussion for us, so thank you.
it really does, and we'd like to also thank the staff who set this all up for us, because this is quite a bit of work to get all this together and then take it back down again. So we would like to thank the staff that was all involved. But I do like being in person. We do have a better discussion. So did anybody have any other future agenda topics they would like to bring up at this time? No? Okay. And then, oh, I've lost my, hang on, follow-up board questions. All right, from our last meeting, we had none. We had no follow-up board questions.
So I think we have one this evening around nutrition services and trying to
Yes.
get a sense for how that was being
Yes.
used now and how we might be able to understand the impact of offering that for all students without other qualifications. I mean, it just does to help support our budget conversation,
Yeah.
to understand what might be involved with that.
Yeah, all students or the students who are just above, who don't actually qualify, but the families still need help.
Correct. Yeah, so either one of those two things.
Yeah.
And the questions about the staff that we currently have for counselors, psychologists, and social workers?
Yeah,
And-
good update. A list of all of our social and emotional support staff and how they've grown over the last couple of years. And how do those ratios compare to best practice, for example?
Right. And caseload if that's possible, but if
Yeah.
that's too tedious, I think just getting staff numbers is good right now. And then the second piece of information is the cost for a parallel track for delaying start time or different start times for the high schools. So what does that cost annually? Debbie, you mentioned 75 buses and 100-some bus drivers, but if we could get that costed out?
We don't necessarily have to have 75 more buses, do we? Or
Yeah.
do we?
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, having that number,
So that'd be going to a two-tier system, for example.
pardon me?
That would be going to a two-tier system.
Well, it's still doing your traditional, the elementary and middle school. But yes, two-tiered, you're right.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
so if you go to a two-tier system where you have middle school running at the same time as high school, then
Yes,
it's a
that's it.
two-tier system.
Yeah.
That's
And
where I'm
that's where you
thinking
need
parallel.
to double the number of buses. I wasn't clear whether you were talking about like a hybrid process where you had some students that would come you'd run 7 hours in the day, and you'd have some students come late and stay late, in which case then you might not need a full complement of another 76 buses. I mean, there's so many options that are
Right.
available when we're doing this. The simplest one is you're going to go to a two-tier system. You
Yes.
need double the number of buses, and you need double the number of drivers.
Yep.
Yeah, last time we looked at it was about a year ago, and it was about 6 million, off the top of my head.
And that's for the cost of the buses or the annual operating expense?
I believe that was just the cost of the buses, not
Okay.
the operating expenses.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be very important for us to understand the operating expense because that's our ongoing cost. We have some bond money that we could use to support the bus costs.
Yes, you'd have to find property to park them somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think
So
it's-
that would be an additional expense,
Yeah.
and right now, there is a driver shortage in Southeast Michigan, so.
Yeah, right,
If you
right.
notice the signs everywhere along,
We'll just get the cost of.
Right.
yeah.
Also, we talked about enhanced data, so I don't know if that's something that'd be more reflective in the superintendent's report as far as trends in Wayne County as well as PCCS kind of over time. That was something we talked about, and then also the close contact. It sounded like that's going to be something discussed in the committee, how we want to present that.
So the quarantine dashboard conversation,
Yeah.
we're going to talk about that tomorrow during our meeting, so that's where we'll come up with hopefully some more information.
Great.
But I think regardless, whatever that discussion is, Superintendent Merritt, if you could send that in board notes for the whole team?
Yep.
All right, does anybody have anything else? All right, seeing nothing else, we are going to adjourn the meeting. We have come to the end of our agenda. I have 9:49. Thank you so much for attending. Have a lovely week. It is going to be still beautiful weather out.